OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
All right, a very good morning to you. Welcome along. It is Wednesday morning. It's 7:30. This is OTB AM. Shane is here.
Good morning, how are things?
Kathleen's here.
Good morning, guys.
You're a little bit bleary-eyed, Kathleen?
A little bit bleary-eyed, yeah. I had such good intentions last night. I was like, no, I'm going to watch the Champions League, I'm going to go to bed, get an early sleep, and then I'm going to get up early this morning and watch the game back, because obviously we were in very early and a 12:30 kickoff is not exactly conducive to good sleep. But then it was just the City match finished, and I was kind of like, team news.
You stayed up and watched it live?
I watched the first half live, yeah.
Right, okay.
Because I was like, the team news was coming out, and I was kind of curious as to what Vera Pauw was going to do, and then the team news came out, and I was still kind of awake, and I was like, what if we do the amazing? Like, what if something incredible happens and I'm asleep, and I will be so annoyed at myself when I wake up tomorrow morning and watch it back. So yeah, I watched the first half, then I tried to go to sleep, couldn't really sleep, so I was saying to Shane, I should have literally just stayed up and watched the game, and then I came in here at 5 o'clock this morning and watched the whole thing back again, because I just love the pain.
So Ireland got beaten by 1-0 by the USA last night?
Yeah, they did. I mean, kind of a mixed performance. Definitely some positives to take away from the entire trip, but the goal that we let in was frustratingly similar to some of the goals that we thought we had kind of cut out of our game.
It's just a long range punt from 40 yards.
Yeah, and like obviously Courtney Brosnan thought that it was going to come in, like she thought she was going to be able to punch it away, but misjudged how far it was going to come in, and it just sailed over her head. Unfortunate, because it's the second time out of the 3 goals that have been scored over these 2 games that she's kind of been caught out for bad positioning, which actually, when I said it on Twitter at the weekend about the first goal that went in, I got a lot of very angry Courtney Brosnan fans after me saying it was actually the defence's fault, and I was like, there was two at play there. It was the defence. It was also Courtney Brosnan being far too far in one side of her goal.
We always do that. We always shoot ourselves in the foot. We don't seem to concede like proper great team goals where we couldn't have done much about it. It always seems to be possibly and partially our fault.
Yeah, it was a little bit. I mean, I really wouldn't have minded if we had lost 1-0 to the US and they had scored some sort of screamer. You know, Trinity Rodman had done something incredible. I actually wouldn't even have been all that mad if it was Becky Sauerbrunn that got it off the header in the first 3 minutes that she tried. The only reason I would have been mad about that is because Adanovsky literally told us they were going to try and do that. They only played her for 30 minutes because it was her hometown game and they wanted to celebrate her getting 200 caps. So they gave her 30 minutes, tried this one set piece that they said they were going to try off a corner to try and get her a header to get her first ever goal in her 15-year career with the US, and we just gave her a free header. And I was like, I know we're trying to support our own here and everything, but also let's not give away goals that easily. But yeah, it was definitely a more tired performance than the one on Saturday. I felt on Saturday we were pushing for those goals for a lot longer, whereas we came out in the second half and we looked wrecked. The closest we looked like getting a goal in the second half was when we made some changes in the last 10 minutes and stuck Louise Quinn up top and just hammered in corners and crosses, which is very much going back to our old playbook of how we did things in the past. But yeah, it was...
We didn't make wholesale changes. This was so Katie McCabe played, Denise Sullivan played.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought that Vera Pauw might have changed it up a bit more, even though she did say during the weekend that her main thing for this game was to try and give players time and also to see how different systems gelled. So continuing on from what we tried on Saturday, big ones probably would have been the fact that Aoife Mannion and Sinead Farrelly weren't in the squad at all, but Vera Pauw had said before the match that she is managing their game time at the moment. Aoife Mannion makes a little bit more sense because United are doing that anyways because she's coming back from an ACL. Farrelly, I mean, Emma Carroll was making the point there just before we came on air that those 60 minutes that she played the weekend is the only 60 minutes we've seen of her in an Ireland jersey. And while, yes, she did very, very well. And I think like a lot of people were excited by her. There's not another camp until like the end of June now. The squad's coming out around that time too. Would you not have chucked her on for even like 20 minutes just to see how she performs in the squad? Or like, was that just a once-off? Because Vera Pauw basically said after the game on Saturday that she's on the plane. So either she's seeing something that the rest of us haven't seen, which is fair enough. I mean, that's her job to see those things. But I think, I just would have been interested to see how she gelled in with the squad a bit more.
I suppose one of the main positives, Kathleen, is the fact that we weren't overawed in either game. And that's probably testament to the fact that Vera Pauw has lined up all these big game friendlies.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think chaotic sometimes in that we would forget who we're playing and the US would make a break and you could just see the panic a little bit on our faces. But I also think when you look at like the history of results that we have against the US, a 2-0 and a 1-0 defeat is very respectable. Now, the US are kind of at a stage at the moment where they're messing around with their team quite a lot and trying to work things out. Like a lot of the US fans are really annoyed with how Andonovski has led this team over the last couple of years because he hasn't really nurtured those younger talents in the way that they would like him to. The Trinity Rodmans, saw Alyssa Thompson, the number 1 NWSL draft pick. She made a start last night and played quite well. Their midfield is a bit of a shambles. So we definitely weren't hitting on them at their peak, I would say. But at the same time, I think we gained a lot of insight into the squad and the ways that we can play. And I think one of you guys said it on air the other day that Vera Pauw has obviously been listening to a bit of Koi Gig over the last couple of months, or at least not admitting that she's listening to a bit of Koi Gig over the last couple of months, because the sort of positive play that we saw over the last 2 games is the exact sort of stuff that we've been calling for. And I think if we can build off that in the final couple of games ahead of the World Cup, it could be interesting.
Except that the other big thing that happened in world football last night was that England got beaten by Australia.
Yeah, so Australia ended England's 30-game unbeaten streak, which is no mean feat. One thing I will say about this, as like you can't take away from Australia, like fair credit to them, they did beat them, but also the 2 goals I would argue were more that England's defence was a shambles than Australia necessarily pulled something amazing. So like the first goal was Leah Williamson. I don't know, did she just not see Sam Kerr coming on her outside? She headed the ball down to Mary Earps and just like didn't get enough power on it. Basically put it on a plate for Sam Kerr, which you don't do. And then the second one was it deflected off. It was a cross into the box, deflected off Leah Williamson. And I think it was Lucy Bronze. Again, for some reason, did not see Charlie Grant running in behind her, and it was a completely free header. So possibly missing a little Millie Bright influence in the defence for England there. But
that's the first time that England have conceded 2 under Wiegman.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, you can't take anything away from Australia. I'm possibly pulling at straws here a little bit to comfort myself because, again, with this Australia team, they've actually been on a really similar journey to ourselves with that they have, their world-class players, their Caitlin Fords, their Sam Kerrs, but they also have players that play semi-pro back home. And over the last couple of years, Tony Gustafsson has been really working with this team to kind of get them into a cohesive unit and like bringing together that world-class element with that semi-professional element. And they've had a bit like ourselves in the European qualifiers. They had a lot of games where they should have performed and they just didn't, and it seems now they're hitting their stride exactly as they're going into a home World Cup. And I know a few Australian journalists that I met during the Euros last summer, and I was talking to them about the games last night, and they're quietly confident about how this team is performing at the moment and where they're heading. So
as in they think they have a chance of winning the entire thing.
I don't know if they're going straight to like we have a chance of winning the entire thing, but they definitely feel like they can go on a run in the tournament.
Yeah. In a way that we're like, we might maybe if everything breaks our way, potentially get out of the group or get some draws. And they're like, no, we could win it.
I mean, the other side to this is that like they did draw 1-0 with Scotland, or sorry, they lost 1-0 to Scotland in their other game in this international window, but they did have a few injuries, and also they didn't play Sam Kerr in that match. So, you know.
Should be playing against us, no doubt, in the World Cup.
I'm sure.
Your description of the goals that they scored sounded perilously like your description of the goals we conceded.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Yeah,
like, okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that, yeah.
Dan Delaney says in the comments, I get the feeling that we are in big trouble against Australia in that first game. That's my look. I mean, this is it now, and then we slowly build up, and then on the verge of the tournament, we lose the run of ourselves.
Yeah.
That's the traditional.
Well, I don't know if I would say if we're in big trouble, because like in the same way we have struggled mentally sometimes, so have this Australian team. So like, there is a possibility that either side come into this game and it's 80,000 people. It's a home World Cup for them. It's our first ever major tournament. You know, there's a lot of different elements at play. Yeah. And I think it's just how well both managers manage that run in over the next couple of months.
Australian sports culture is to step into the moment and enjoy it. To Kathy Freeman their way around to, like, you know, being Olympic champion in front of your home crowd, to being a rugby team who were nowhere near good enough to, we were suddenly in the final. That's how good we were. I don't know. I'm just concerned that Australia, their rugby culture, their sports culture, not their rugby culture. Their sports culture has been long high achievers.
It's definitely more defined than ours, I will put it.
And Nigeria beating... So we played Nigeria in our last group game. They beat the other co-host New Zealand 3-0 last night. So it's all looking great for that group.
Canada lost 2-1 to France, though.
Right.
Hervé Renard has taken over there, has had a very successful first international window. Really interesting guy. Like, I don't know what I expected from him when he took over at France. And, you know, a lot of the time when you see these managers come in from the men's game, you're a bit like, have you ever even watched a game of women's football? Because they are different. I don't think anyone can disagree about that. And he's been really impressive, especially for that French team that were so chaotic before under Diacre. Like, he talked about one of the players, she had a baby and she was coming into camp, and like, as you guys know, this is something that we've talked a lot about on Quite Gig before, and he was like, well, why wouldn't she bring her baby with her? She's going to be distracted if the baby isn't there. So like, we have to do everything that we can to make sure that she is supported and that the child is supported in the camp and that they have that space for themselves, because that's equally as important as anything on the pitch. And then last night he was like, I don't understand why we're playing the Olympic champions on the same night as Champions League football. He was like, this is world-class football happening, but how else is it? It's not going to be watched by as many people because you're competing with other world-class football. And I was like, oh, Hervé Renard, I am actually very impressed with.
It's a fair point though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
well, all sports have this nonsensical idea that we're going to be the ones who everybody watches and it's going to be us. It's our way or the highway. And it's like, no, you just have to just schedule it for like 5 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock, or the day before or the day after. Like,
yeah, there are so many.
I was thinking the same about Bows and Rovers at the weekend. It's on telly, but at the same time the rugby's on, and it's like these are dueling banjos. We could have, like, you know, 1 at 5, 1 at 7. Everybody's happy.
yeah, I feel like people in the League of Ireland assume that, there's no crossover. Sure, the people watching the rugby won't be watching Rovers Bows, but of course there's crossover. There always is. There's people who just love sport and they'll watch whatever's on. So,
quick question from Danny Mack: would 3 draws get us out of the group? Probably won't.
No, it don't.
No. I mean, traditionally in 4-team groups, 3 draws has been enough, but you need all the results to go your way, and
like
teams are going to take points off each other.
Yeah, like on a numerical, I'm sure there is some sort of like numerical way that it probably would, but it would require a lot of other stuff to go our way, and I just don't really expect that to happen.
You need one team to dominate the group.
Yeah,
and then
everyone else to flounder a little bit.
And then the other game has to be a draw, and then you end up with...
Grant, just beat the Aussies in the first game. It's easy. This is easy, folks.
Yeah.
Well, we've already done it in Tala, so you know, what's the difference in an 80,000 seater stadium in Sydney?
That was the birth of the Vera Pauw era, really, in a way where...
I mean, it would be it's going to be an incredible full circle moment anyways, but it actually would be a mad full circle moment if we did manage to win. I mean, look, I'm not getting ahead of myself. There's still a few months to go. Well, it's 99 days today until the World Cup.
Yeah.
99.
I'll be coming in every day and I'll just pop up in this corner. I'll just like 98 days. Hey guys, 84.
A poster up on the brick wall behind you there, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
The wall's fake. It's 7:44. Nothing would stick to it. 7:44 this morning here on OTBAM. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. The wall's not fake, by the way. It's not green. Méabh De Búrca is going to join us for her analysis of the game at 8. Jonathan Wilson's going to join us at 20 past 8 to look at the Champions League last night and how Frank Lampard's going to get on tonight. Sports news at 8:45. Keith Wood at 8:50. Power rankings with Tommy Rooney at 9:10. Finally correct. And a classic crappy quiz coming your way at 9:30. We've got to talk about the performance of Manchester City last night. Absolutely dominant against Bayern Munich. Pep afterwards, not quite comfortable, like a little bit smug, as you would expect.
Oh, very smug, yeah.
But I still like listing off all of the great players. That was he listing off the great players so that his players were watching, going, "Oh, they could still do something to us," or was he listing off all the great players that, look at what I just did? I swatted them down. I beat them. In fairness, he did say that Bayern were better at various stages, and that they made some changes, obviously, which helped influence the outcome. Which obviously reflects very well on him.
Yeah, but then you look at Jan Sommer's performance, like if only for a couple of saves he made, said he would have won by more, and it was just a completely dominant performance. That Rodri goal, that was his first Champions League goal ever, and it's just an absolute corker. What a strike off the left. It was just one of those that...
Is he left-footed?
I don't even know, but it was very De Bruyne-esque. I don't think he's predominantly left-footed.
It didn't look like
he was given a lot of space as well.
Yeah, it was given to him. Musiala, I think, was the one who was supposed to be tracking him.
Like, he did do well to take it away in the first place, but he just ran into open space. He actually could have brought it in further if he wanted, but he decided to go for the spectacular.
100%. There should be a bit of appreciation given him. My housemate pointed this out last night for English stadiums in the Champions League and the knee slide opportunities it provides. And there's a little bit of rain. Rodri mentioned it afterwards. He said, well, that's one of the things when I was in Spain. I couldn't knee slide, and now when a player scores, you have the lovely 15-20 metre knee slide, which he did.
All three of them did it last night.
All three of them, and fair play to them. The busiest man was probably the fourth official, the technical area that Pep is supposed to stay in and Tuchel is supposed to stay in. Turns out neither of them wanted to stay in those areas, so constant little slaps on the wrist for the lads who wanted to broach that space. But City's performance generally, I mean, right from the back, Nathan Ake was brilliant. Rodri was probably most people's man of the match, I think, last night. Grealish was literally involved in every good thing that City did. Rio Ferdinand made a very good point on TV after the match as well, how that goal for Bernardo Silva, that header, where literally Grealish just makes the run to cancel out any possible option Upamecano had at the back in terms of playing it out, and then manages to dispossess, play it off to Haaland, and then the ball ends up at the back of the net from Bernardo Silva's header.
That's the back heel from Grealish.
That's the back heel. It's brilliant.
Grealish is he good at football.
Turns out Upamecano had one of those nights where you literally forgot how to play football. Like, every time he touched the ball, you're like, this lad is about to do something ridiculous. He just couldn't even complete like a 10-15 yard pass at some stages last night. His head was gone. It was
actually getting to the point where I kind of wanted him to get the ball, just because I was curious as to how badly he was going to mess it up. Like,
he couldn't have done it in the Aviva, you know. But he's one of the best centre backs in the world, and yet last night City made them look completely normal at times. Bayern did have their chances. They probably looked a little livelier when Cancelo and Muller came off the bench. I thought Mane as well, but like no massive clear cut chances where you'd say, oh, that could have been a goal. And even the reception that Joao Cancelo got coming off the bench for Bayern, I was like, this man won 2 Premier Leagues and a League Cup with Man City, and he's getting roundly booed by the Etihad Stadium. So I mean, football fans are fickle and they forget pretty fast, it turns out.
Who were they booing, sorry?
Cancelo when he came off the bench.
Alright, well,
I mean, I know he left in strange circumstances.
He's coming back though.
Yeah, this is the thing.
He's coming back. Well, I mean, obviously Pep is gonna. Will
he want to come back after a reception? Like, I mean,
is there a possibility Pep wins the Champions League and goes? Probably not. He'd want to defend it. Is there a chance he loses in the final and goes? There is.
I think if he loses, it's more likely that he leaves.
He's too stubborn. He'd be like, no, we'll go again. We got close.
Was it this year he signed a new contract? Or
it was at the World Cup, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't really mean that much.
No, I know it doesn't, but yeah.
I know you mentioned in the pre-show meeting, Kathleen, about Haaland's lack of touches compared to everyone else on the pitch, but that's... It's funny, it's what he does, and you always felt like he was going to get the goal. Like John Stones did really, really well to head that ball back across the area, and Haaland's finish was exactly what you would expect. But It was a really good game, I thought. Like in large portions, mainly because of City's dominance, I suppose. And
I just find City so hard to watch. Like, I don't find them an enjoyable watch.
Was it like Limerick hurling, that conversation from yesterday? They're too good to watch.
A little bit, but it's not even that they're too good. It's boring to me now. Maybe it is because they're too good. I just find it a little bit boring. I actually disagree with the Limerick thing slightly. I really like watching Limerick play hurling. I think, the skill is incredible, and maybe that's just an appreciation I have for hurling over football. But I don't know. It's just the only time I actually enjoy watching City is in the Champions League, because I'm like, there's actually a vague hope that something mad is going to happen and Pep's not going to get his Champions League title. But I don't know, it just seemed kind of clear early on enough last night that Bayern weren't up to the challenge, and that...
I don't think this tie is entirely over.
In what sense?
There's a second leg still to come.
I would have thought at 2-0 I was saying that.
Yeah.
I think that they were creating enough chances, enough opportunities, and there's enough flakiness still on the City side. Like, we had Mark Lawrence on yesterday, and what do you want from City if you're Arsenal? Do you want them to keep winning? And so you've got these games. You don't want them to keep winning 3-0 because the level of confidence that they get and the sense that they are all conquering and they're now the blue machine. But I just feel like there was a few chances there. Well, it was like Ederson was making some saves. Now, okay, some of them were long range stuffs, but there was one that was spilled out, and they just needed. I think that I can see Bayern getting an early goal at the Allianz, and suddenly City are like, we've seen this movie before.
3-0 feels different to 2-0 in some way.
And it does, because there's an extra goal there.
There's an extra goal there. Yeah. The game of two halves. I do think the key moment of the match for me, the key turning point, was just before City opened the scoring. Musiala had that shot blocked by Ruben Diaz, and if you look at the replay in slow motion, it's going in.
It does look like
Ederson's going the wrong way.
Now, having said that, the superstar, it was, and that's I don't know. I think there's enough about the City and the sense of jeopardy in all the games that they're going to have for the rest of the season.
And we have seen it with them in the Premier League. Like, they have slipped up a lot more this season than we've seen them do it in previous seasons. I don't know. I just feel like, kind of like what Shane was saying, 3-0 does feel a little bit far with how Bayern looked last night. It just didn't feel like there was any, I don't know.
Well, the papers have agreed with you. Bye bye Bayern is the headline in the back of the Mirror. Hair raising is the back to usual hairstyle, but Haaland still a cut above as City rip Bayern to shreds. There was a lot made of Erling Haaland's hair. Blue Thunder. Haaland put seal on City's show of no mercy. They're the headlines, and some of the English ones. Blue Murder. Manchester City 3, Bayern Munich 0. Okay, sorry, we didn't actually give the score. We did give the score. They think it's all over.
Oh, I see what they did there.
Erling Killer Blow fires City to brink of semis. Is the back of the Sun. And there's also a picture of Frank Lampard with the Champions League trophy. Right, we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes' time. And then Lightning Rod sparks City rout is the back page of the London Independent for that one. The other big news coming through, up and away, question mark. They see the Examiner, they're feeling, I think it's just
all over.
With City, until they're standing over the bloodied corpse of the trophy, and Pep actually has it. He has the big cup, he's got the big ears, and he's holding them. I'm not going to believe it. I am the doubting Thomas when it comes to Pep and his ability to win this trophy. I know you guys are crowning him already, obviously.
Oh no, I'm not saying I'm crowning him overall. I just think in this particular tie, City have their number. Past that, anything goes.
I think Real Madrid are going to win the Champions League.
Well, they're not, because Chelsea are going to beat them tonight, according to Frank Lampard, who's been telling everybody that we've done this before in 2012. Because as far as I can see, the one thing that athletes want is, back in my day,
oh yeah,
they love those stories more than anything else.
Yeah.
That's my experience of talking to and listening to changing rooms who've high profile managers who were superstars in their time. And it's all, well, back in my days, that's how we did it.
Yeah, used to walk the training in his bare feet, Lampard.
A bit of call for the fire.
Yeah.
No, none of your fancy meals.
Back in my day.
He's supposed to be doing the match last night. He's supposed to be doing comms on it.
Was he?
Yeah.
And then he got a gig?
Turns out he was busy. Yeah. No, fair play. I'm looking forward to that game tonight, but I just can't see Chelsea getting over that Real Madrid team. Realistically, let's be honest.
I mean, I really hope for the sake of the tournament they don't. Chelsea can feck off with their boring football. No thanks. With their chaotic nonsense.
Now the league's over, so maybe they do.
Tactically inept.
Yeah, Inter Milan have 1 foot in the semi-finals after last night as well, beating Benfica 2-0 away. So Romelu Lukaku with a penalty for the second goal. So it's going to be an interesting lineup either way, I think, in the semi-finals this year, the Champions League. But yeah, it's Real Madrid's to lose for me.
What do you mean 29 says? I still think Napoli are the most complete team in the tournament. I really hope Napoli win it. Like, that would be
that's the story.
That's the dream scenario here at the end.
I don't think anyone would disagree. Well, unless you're a supporter of one of the teams that are left, but I feel like every neutral going is fully on the Napoli bandwagon.
Semi-final draw has been made, right?
It has.
Why am I forgetting this?
Well, I think everyone has fallen in love with Victor Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia this year with Napoli, and like the fact that they have unlike City, they have Serie A pretty much in the bag, so they can concentrate on the Champions League as well, which is a massive advantage. I mean, I was living with an Arsenal fan like yourself, Kathleen, last night, and I was like, before the game, what do you want to happen here? And I think further to Ger's point, probably didn't want them to win 3-0, but wants them to get all the way to the final. And then
I'd love if it was like a 3-2 sort of situation and it was actually a bit of back and forth and you genuinely thought like, oh, will Bayern steal it? And like, you know, City had a bit of nerves around the whole thing. I think that probably would have been better in the long term. But also like with the squad that City have, I don't know how much actually being in multiple tournaments is gonna affect them. You know, they're so experienced at this stage, having gone the way for the last multiple seasons.
It's just possible injuries. You know, you saw De Bruyne last night howling a little bit and you're like, oh, this could be, you know, if that injury was more serious, all of a sudden you're saying, well, that has an impact on the title race. So it's avoiding injuries in the Champions League, I guess, and the FA Cup. So if they can do that, then they'll be fine. As you say, with the strength and depth, they probably have the more strength and depth than Arsenal, although Arsenal have certainly
completely
got there much better than they were last season in that department. So
they're getting there slowly but surely. I mean, I think the Jesus injury probably showed that, you know, there are players there that can step in and do a job, and I think if Arteta can sign a few more this summer, that would be great.
It's Real Madrid and Man City on the same side of the draw, and it's AC Milan or Napoli on the same side of the draw as Benfica or Inter. So it could be an all Milan if Milan managed to do Napoli, or it could be Napoli versus Inter in the semi-final, which you'd think, given the respective performances in the league so far, Napoli would be feeling pretty good about. So it's setting up for Napoli to make it to the final against either Real Madrid or Manchester City. But those semi-finals, if they go the way we think they are going to go after last night, 2 legs in 1 week, the 9th and 10th of May and the 16th and 17th of May will be Real Madrid against Manchester City. They will be good games.
Oh, crackers.
We deserve that.
We
I think we deserve to see exactly what that would be like. The other big news coming out from the football world overnight is, and it broke first in the London Times, is that Jude Bellingham won't be joining Liverpool, that Liverpool have pulled out of their Bellingham pursuit because they feel like investing all their resources in one player is bad business when they need so much reinforcement, and that the only way to do that properly is to search around for some better value.
Well, it certainly sounds like he wants either City or Real Madrid. Manchester United are another option, but maybe further down the list. And it depends what way Eric Ten Hag wants to go, but you can understand Bellingham's thinking as well if he didn't want to go to Liverpool, especially if they don't get Champions League for next season.
So the way it's written in the papers is that this isn't Bellingham's decision.
Yeah.
That Liverpool have actually pulled out in advance of this, and I don't know, maybe Bellingham, maybe somebody has tipped him off that wasn't what he wanted, and that they weren't going to get there in the end, and so therefore, rather than it be a humiliation later to be rejected, they're no, I'm breaking up with you. But I don't know if that's the case. It seems like certainly what they've briefed is that they've decided that they have so many holes in their team that Jude Bellingham isn't going to be a one-man messiah to fix this team, and that rather than spending their 150 million on him, they're going to spend that on several players. So Mason Mount gets mentioned, Tielemans, who's obviously free at the end of the season, is getting mentioned, and then there's a bunch of other midfielders. There's a 20-year-old at Bayern who's not getting any game time at the moment, who everybody wants apparently except Bayern. This always happens, and then there's a few other players who they've been linked with too.
It ends a transfer saga.
Conor Gallagher.
Yeah, there you go. Like Jurgen Klopp's was going to be asked about Jude Bellingham fairly consistently between now and the summer if this hadn't happened. So I think now that cuts the question for sure, and any element of a potential transfer saga is out the window. So yeah, a smart move by Liverpool, depending on who dropped out this story. But yeah, very fascinating to see where he ends up, because he will leave Dortmund, you'd imagine, this summer.
Well, is it a smart move by Liverpool?
Well, to announce it this early if they don't want him. You know, they don't let it drag on, but...
Well, because the Liverpool fans are bitter.
Yeah, well, of course they want.
No, Cal says, I always supported FSG, but after last summer windows and the news that broke last night and the lies they basically have told, I can see a lot of Liverpool fans wanting them out now.
But maybe Liverpool and Klopp are right. Maybe FSG are right here. Maybe he's not the man to fix all these problems. Like, we don't know how he would end up at Liverpool. You know, we can't tell the future. But they probably do need plugs gapped in about 2 or 3, 4 different areas of the pitch. I mean, look at the performances this season, and I don't think Jude Bellingham fixes them all. And he's such an expensive talent that you look at the likes of City, they can well afford him. Real Madrid can well afford him as well. But it depends where he wants to end up. Maybe he doesn't want to go back to England at this stage. You know, maybe Real Madrid is the option for him, and he comes back when he's 25, 26. He's only 19, Jude Bellingham. He's got plenty of time to come back to the Premier League. He's not even in his prime, you'd imagine, yet. So unless he's a Michael Owen type. So yeah, fascinated to see where he ends up. Don't be too sad, Liverpool fans. He'll be fine. They'll sign a few big names.
Well, yeah.
Are you confident about that?
I think they're going to spend money anyway. It'll be interesting to see who they sign.
Who would
Mason
be the
Mount's
big
an interesting
names
one
that you think Liverpool will sign that will actually make a difference?
You just have to pick 2 or 3 players that are £40 million things rather than this 130, 140 million pound talent. I think when you're a team in flux like Liverpool and a team that's clearly in transition, those are the type of signings you need to make. You don't just make one big massive marquee signing and go, there you go, that's fixed. So the likes of Mason Mount, depending on what Mason Mount costs, would probably be a good sign for Liverpool.
Look, I kind of, all the managers who have ever played Mason Mount, apart from the Potter era at Chelsea, everybody else has picked him and put him in the team, and he's got a lot of praise. I have yet to see exactly how he's going to dominate games or develop into one of those players, but he is one of the players who's linked, and as he only has a year left in his contract and they don't seem to want him, then they think they'll be able to get him for what they would say is value, which could be anything between 40 and 60 million. Tielemans is free, and like everybody was raving about Tielemans a year ago, if he gets back to that form, then he would probably be a good signing for any of those top 4 teams. The other players that they're linked with in the Telegraph this morning are Conor Gallagher, Moises Caicedo, Ryan Gravenberch of Bayern Munich. He's the 20-year-old who they signed from Ajax, who's not getting game time. Nunez of Wolves. So would 3 of those fix Liverpool's midfield?
They go a long way, certainly, if they could get a few of them. So Liverpool's transfer battles are going to be the big one, I think, over the next few months. Alright,
8:02. That's what Liverpool fans are reduced to talking about, the transfer window, and it hasn't even opened yet because you're not involved in Champions League action and all their barely. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm picking at the scab this morning and I shouldn't be. It's unfair. Right, 8:02, as I said. The Football Pod are hitting the road again. They're heading to Killarney for Off the Ball's first big show of the summer. It's all with thanks to AIB. Tommy Rooney, Paddy Andrews and James O'Donoghue will be bringing the Football Pod to the Great Southern Hotel for a live episode with special guests on Thursday the 4th of May. Join us for a brilliant night of football chat and crack. Plenty of focus on the All-Ireland champions Kerry and the contenders who are coming for their throne. It's an exclusive off-air event. Tickets are limited and they're selling really fast, so don't delay. Go to offtheball.com/events. It's all in partnership with AIB. Check out the hashtag #TheToughest for more. Now, Méabh De Búrca joins us to offer some analysis on the Republic of Ireland's 1-0 defeat at the hands of the USA last night. Méabh, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Not too bad now. How are you doing?
What did you make of this performance?
Yeah, it was a very positive performance, I think, overall. Obviously, it's disappointing, I suppose, maybe not to score. Maybe we're hoping for too much against the world champions, like I said. But it was overall, I thought it was a good performance. The goal was, I suppose, unfortunate for Courtney in that it'll go down as a goalkeeping error, really, because the goal came just inside, just before half time from Alana Cook. She was crossing the ball in after a corner initially from the US. So from that point of view, I suppose it's a little bit disappointing, but overall, I think a lot of positives to take.
You can be glass half full, you can be glass half empty about a performance like this. Glass half empty, just for a minute, is that we didn't create enough chances over the 2 games to actually score against the USA, and that has been a big problem for us. So are you seeing at least any signs of progress in terms of creating good quality chances?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in terms of shots on goal, last night it was, I suppose, 2 and 2. So, we matched them in that regard. Like going forward, I think really, I suppose it's always going to be on the break against a team like the US, who are going to always dominate possession. And I think really it's when they're up the field for set pieces, that's when we can really counter-attack and look to use the pace. I think especially on the wings with Katie and Heather, I think they're a really big threat, especially with teams like the US who like to push their fullbacks forward. That's where the space is out wide. And we did create bits of chances, few chances, I suppose. So from that point of view, it was a little bit more positive, but you're always going to be so limited, in chances, especially from play and against teams like this. So it's set pieces really is where we could try to make it matter.
What did you think of that changing of tactics from Vera Pauw? Because I don't know how long people have been talking about the fact that they want, to see it, is it possible for Ireland to do something other than a low block, to utilise Heather Payne in a different way rather than that, her being the lone striker up top and running the absolute length of the pitch multiple times, but actually not getting any opportunities to score. And obviously we saw Kira Carusa kind of filling in that role over this international window and Heather going into that wing role. Do you think that's something that Vera Pauw is going to persist with? Was there enough benefit that we got from it that this is actually something that we can implement in the World Cup?
Yeah, personally, I think so. I think Heather is definitely suited to the wing. I would have known her. She played at Salted Devon, the same club as I did back in the day, and she always would have operated predominantly as a winger and wouldn't be known for her goal scoring ability. She's just so prominent in assisting and everything, that I think that's where she could be best utilised for sure. And even I was listening to the American feed last night, and they did say that she nearly burned a side on the length of the pitch. But then I suppose in turn, with her using so much energy going forward, then the US also used it. I think Sophia Smith was out there at some stages, just using her pace as well to get by. But I think definitely in an out wide position is where she's suited. And it was interesting to see Kira Carusa seem to be now the preferred option. I suppose before this camp, maybe we would have thought Amber Barrett would have been in with a shout up there as well. She got very limited game time over the course of the two games. So it is interesting to see how, I suppose, different players are being preferred in different positions now going forward with a view to the World Cup in mind.
It's interesting you bring up Amber Barrett there, because she had that shoulder injury, and then when she was over in Germany for a little bit, she was playing in a full back position as she was trying to get more game time coming, and it was quite a serious injury. It kept her out for a couple of months. And when she was talking heading into this camp, she was saying one of the things that she really wanted to do was get some minutes, and obviously she didn't. I think she came on around 85 minutes last night, so only played about 5 minutes plus whatever extra time there was. Would, for a player like her, what's the concern level, do you think, now? Because obviously she gave us that magical moment against Scotland, but even she herself has said since that, that's absolutely no guarantee. And now that Vera Pauw seems to be favouring, having Carusa up there with Shiva and Farrelly providing the support into her and playing those balls in, that's not really Amber Barrett's style of play. Is that something that's going to be a concern for her over the next couple of months?
Yeah, I suppose, although it's still, I know we're just less now than 100 days out, there's still 2 games to be played, Zambia and France, and we can see that a lot actually has changed. Even you look at in terms of Lucy Quinn, who wasn't initially in the squad, and then last night started. So it's
player of the match as well on the RT feed.
Actually, you're right. Yeah, exactly. So, I don't think anyone really would have predicted that. I don't know. I suppose it's just an intriguing one, really, how someone can't be named in the initial squad and then go on to start and, like you said, be player of the match, which is great for Lucy going forward as well. But going back to your question in terms of Amber, I think like that, anything can change. And if, she hits a run of form now with her club, that's all she can focus on, obviously, is her game time with the club, and try to perform as best she can there. Like every player really in the squad, that's what they're going to be looking to focus on between now and I think it's the 22nd of June when they face Zambia next. So like I said, a lot can change in the course of a very short amount of time.
Are you suggesting, Kathleen, she might not make the squad?
I don't think she's a certainty by any stretch, especially with the way that Vera was setting up her team in this particular window and the fact that she's not getting a whole lot of game time in Germany. Now, I say that Vera always used to be very big on game time and players getting it, and then we see players like Sinead Farrelly coming in and other players in the squad who haven't had a lot of game time. But yeah, like it's entirely possible at this stage. I think there's a lot of positions up for grabs. I was looking at my last edition of Power Rankings that I did during the last international window, and there was quite a few movers and shakers. So, I mean, it's kind of like what Méabh says. There is still a bit of time, and we do still have those games. But I would be a little worried if I was Amber Barrett at the moment, yeah.
Is it concerning at all, Méabh, that we really only started to threaten last night when Louise Quinn is lumped up top? Like, I know it's probably preparation almost for, if you are a goal or two down in a World Cup match, you can utilise that option. But is that a break glass in case of emergency kind of option, do you think?
Yeah, it's an option, definitely. And yeah, like I said, she went up front again last night. And I think, really from set pieces, I think, Louise is definitely is such a threat. But on the flip side then, and we saw it once, I think, around the hour mark last night, the US, they're so dangerous on the break, like all the top nations are. So when we've players committed forward and, the likes of Louise, who in fairness almost always gets her head to the ball, she's going to be one of the most furthest forward. And then, on the flip side, like I said, then when they counter-attack, we're looking for her to chase the length of the pitch. So I suppose what I'm saying is if we could have two Louise Quinns, it could come in handy, especially towards the end of a game. But I mean, it's an option to have, but yeah, it's a last resort really as well. But like I said, if we can really make the set pieces count, that's where I think we'll be a real threat to teams. And like the US as well last night set up, and in the game before set up with a zonal defence. So I think from their point of view, they might be looking at that because they definitely looked vulnerable from that point of view.
Méabh, what's your expectation of how well we're going to get on at the World Cup now that it's like 5 months away?
I would be lying if I'd say I'm already.
Yeah,
I'm up. Yeah, true. Yeah, so I think it's 99 days out as far as I know. But I kind of already looked at the permutations and that, and I think a second round matchup against England would be pretty spicy, to say the least. Would be unreal if we could manage to somehow get through to that round. That would be fantastic. I think if we were to finish second and England were to top their group, we'd face up against each other, which would be mouth-watering, really. But yeah, I think I suppose that the games they're hard to predict because actually yesterday Australia beat England 2-0, and I mean that's definitely not one that could have been predicted either. And I think Canada lost to France, as far as I know, and Nigeria beat New Zealand as well. So it's definitely going to be a very interesting group. I think, like in every tournament, getting something out of the first game is massive. So I really think if we could even, get a point against Australia in what will be, a very tough opening game, especially with the fans. But as we know, there's so many Irish down under as well. It could, it could work in Ireland's favour too. But I think if we got something out of the first game, then who knows after that, but obviously Canada and Nigeria are both going to be very tough games as well.
Kathleen was making the point earlier, Méabh, that Ireland certainly seemed to tire a little bit in the second half last night. And when you look at the list of names that were coming off the bench for the USA, Julie Ertz, Trinity Rodman, Ashley Hatch, it's encouraging enough that a tiring Ireland still managed to nullify their impact and kind of deal with them. Like a 1-0 isn't bad.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think from the US point of view, they could be slightly worried, to be honest, because from their point of view, Ireland should be a team that they should be beating well, if they are, they go into every tournament with the expectation to win, and this World Cup would be no different. They're going to be going for 3 in a row, which would be an incredible achievement. But I don't think, judging off the game yesterday, I don't think, it's much... They've a long way to go, basically, I suppose is what I'm saying. But yeah, from an Irish perspective, just to be able to remain solid and limit their opportunities to 2 shots on goal, And like I said, that I suppose a preventable goal as well. A draw was a realistic result, given based on the performance. So yeah, it is reassuring that we can kind of limit their opportunities. But I suppose the only worry would be that if we do go a goal down and in a tournament situation, then you're going to have to go and try to chase the game a bit more. Last night I think you could see Vera Pauw almost asking for the full-time whistle, which obviously 1-0 they would have taken it before the game, but it's just that extra step now going forward in the World Cup, because 1-0 losses is still no points gained. So it's just a matter of that. Then can we know now, I suppose, that we're able to defend well, but it's whether we can kind of add goals then if they're needed.
Can I ask you, as somebody who's been involved in squads, what the knock-on impact of somebody joining the team at this stage and getting straight into the team, and somebody who's been a hero of the campaign not being on the plane? Do the players care ultimately when they get to the World Cup? Is it a conversation for a day or two and then they get there and actually, it's all business? Or is that the type of thing that could cause some rancor?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, like I said previously, the girls who are still on the plane with the other girls, they probably won't mind as much. I think at this stage there's going to be a bit of a May Feiner attitude towards it, because all the girls individually want to be on that plane, and it really is the girls who miss out who are going to be the ones who'll be thinking about it for a long time, I'm sure, as they watch on the games. But yeah, those within the squad and those who have made it, I don't think they'll be too worried, from their own side, once they're the ones who are on the plane as well.
All right.
Is there something further to that point, though, in that the squad have, say, I don't know, a player like Ciara Grant, who's been involved in like every single squad of the qualifying campaign, maybe hasn't got a whole lot of minutes, and now is very much like she said during this time in the US that she's talked to Vera about what her role is in the team and she's aware of it, but also her position is one of the ones that is probably up for grabs at the moment, and is pretty, that midfield is pretty packed, and she could very easily not make the play. Like, surely there would be some, especially with someone like, and again, this is not, she's just an easy player to pick out, but Sinead Farrelly coming in, only played 60 minutes, has only ever trained with the team 3 times. She played great on Saturday, and if she goes to the World Cup and does a job for us, I don't think I will be complaining. But I just wonder, in the squad, she's a midfielder too. Is there that little bit of a, if you're trying to gel a group?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'm sure there has to be friction. That's understandable, because if there's a player coming in and you can see directly that she's the one that's going to, or could potentially take her position, or even you compare it to the likes of Jamie Finn, who had been predominantly a starter, or at least getting a lot of game time throughout the campaign, and she's kind of gone down the pecking order now as well with the new recruits in. Like I said, Sinead Farrelly and the likes of Aoife Mannion as well. And, in fact, like last night, the two of them were rested as such, so I suppose that would indicate that they're seen to be important players going forward. If you're already trying to, you're obviously injury prevention and that. So, yeah, I'd imagine, when it comes to on the pitch, that I'm sure all the intensity of training sessions and everything is up to the max, because it's such fine lines. It's like that, if they do one thing right or one thing wrong, it could cost them the place, either to go or not go to the World Cup. So a
lot of pressure. Maeve, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
It's Méabh De Búrca giving us some thoughts on the Republic of Ireland's 1-0 defeat against the United States overnight. It is 18 minutes past 8. If you want to get in touch with us, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. You can tweet us at Off The Ball AM. Up next, we're going to talk about last night's game and Manchester City, and maybe a little bit about Chelsea as well with Jonathan Wilson. First, though, a slight tangent talking about whether people follow players or clubs.
A lot of young people now are more drawn towards players than clubs, rather than the point that you just made, where Celtic was generally handed down by generations of fans. Now I think youngsters are more likely to support Mbappe or Messi or Cristiano, whoever they support.
I think it's still support an English club though, wouldn't they?
Probably, but I think they'd be less likely to be drawn to Celtic. But to your emailer's point, I think the big moment was when Rangers, whatever way you want to put this, whether they were liquidated or whether they went down the divisions, depending on your persuasion probably. That was a moment, I think, when Scottish football pretty much went off a cliff.
Yeah,
like Celtic nosedived, and there's even that feeling there was a certain shrug, even with the unbeaten Brendan Rodgers side and the multiple trophies that they were winning.
Yeah.
It was without a rivalry, it didn't have that excitement.
Well, what was the first thing you would do back in the day when you saw the Celtic result? You'd look at the Rangers result.
Yeah.
And so without their...
Still the case.
True. So without that adversary...
But even when Celtic were really good in 03, it wasn't that long ago that Rangers had been really good in Europe. You think back to that kind of 93, 94 period where Rangers were right up there. And then Rangers had some incredible players. As it worked out afterwards, double contracts were probably part of their success. But at the turn of the millennium, both teams were really stacked. They were actually really
they were good at the same time. Yeah, sure. Brian Laudrup was playing for Rangers in his prime.
The De Boers.
And does it grab you? Like
right now?
Or ever?
Not so much. I like watching Ange Postecoglou's teams.
Yeah.
But generally in school, we would have kind of been Celtic well-wishers as opposed to being like rabid Celtic fans.
That's a good way of putting it. That's a very good way of putting it.
We were definitely Henrik Larsson fans.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. Off the Ball will be hosting a live UEFA Champions League roadshow in partnership with Just Eat, and it's coming your way on May 3rd, live from the Mansion House in Dublin.
We'll be joined by some great guests, including UEFA Champions League winner John O'Shea. Our guests will share memorable stories and reminisce about their careers.
We'll also look ahead to the latter stages of the competition.
This is an exclusive off-air event and tickets are limited, so don't delay. Go to offtheball.com/events and we'll see you on the night.
Just Eat, the official food delivery partner of the UEFA Champions League.
Fighting Words, Ukrainian Action in Ireland and the Irish Red Cross have come together to host an exciting concert by some of the best loved artists from both Ireland and Ukraine at Vicar Street on Monday 24th of April. Come show your support with more than 20 great Irish and Ukrainian artists including Glenn Hansard and Colin McInumrah, Kathy Davey, Roddy Doyle and Paul Muldoon, all taking part in support of the millions who have been forced to flee Ukraine. A concert for Ukraine at Vicar Street Monday 24th of April. Tickets on sale from Ticketmaster at just €25 or go to vicarstreet.com.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
A 3-0 win for Manchester City against Bayern Munich last night, and I'm delighted to say Jonathan Wilson is with us to reflect a little bit on that. Jonathan, Pep Guardiola seemed happy, but also, keen to point out that his side were bested in certain elements of the game last night and that the tie's not over. So he'll be happy, but I guess until he actually is through the tie, he's not going to be relaxed. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that is fair, and I think it's a reasonable position to take. I mean, I don't think City were much better than Bayern last night. I think the difference really between the sides was that when Bayern's defence was put under pressure, it crumbled. Upamecano particularly, Jan Sommer had a pretty mixed night, some great saves, but also looked pretty hesitant at times. Whereas City, placed under pressure, defended really well in those sort of, I don't want to say last ditch, that makes it sound too desperate, but in those sort of very basic, sort of visceral bits of defending, the putting in the blocks, the winning the headers. So you think of that Ruben Diaz block at 0-0 for Musiala, which is a great block. There was a couple of corners with the score at 1-0 when City bodies got in the way. It wouldn't have taken a huge amount for one of those to go in, and then maybe it's a different game. But City did stay strong, and Bayern absolutely didn't. And we'd seen that from Bayern the end of the first leg against PSG, that you put them under pressure and they do wobble. Whether that's a function of the Bundesliga being essentially quite straightforward for them and them not going under pressure often, whether it's a function of the individual players, it's pretty hard to say. But Upamecano, I thought the World Cup as well, under pressure looked a bit iffy, and he had a poor second half. So 3-0, realistically it is over. It should be over. But I can see why there's an element of caution there. And I think what Tuchel said afterwards was also very true, that the result was tough for them. I think tough was a word used by the interviewer, but he then repeated it. But the performance, actually, Bayern played pretty well. It was just some individual issues ended up costing them. And City now with Haaland have that cutting edge that perhaps they didn't take that kind of opportunity in previous seasons.
can we just focus a little bit on the Man City defence and the evolution of the team? Because it's a different style and setup, and we're seeing it in these big games now, that it's not just something that he's doing in games where he expects to dominate, but the 4 centre-backs, 2 of whom are full-backs who are happy to step into midfield, is different from having Cancelo and Walker. And even what he was talking about Walker during the week, it was very pronounced. Sometimes he says things and then 3 weeks later he's like, I trained the player by telling him what I wanted to do. So maybe that'll happen with Walker, but it doesn't look like it at the moment. What's going on there? How does that change the balance of the team, and why has he done it, do you think?
I think to an extent it's been forced on him. I think Walker has never been. Walker's great strength is his pace. He's great in terms of recovery, that you can play a high line with Walker and he will get back. We've seen that for England as well. But I don't think he has that same tactical intelligence to say Philip Lam would have, where he can move into one of those, almost a half-back role, a deep-lying central midfield role. Cancelo, I think, was doing that pretty well, but then something personal clearly happened in their relationship and Cancelo was shipped off. And so he had to change things. And John Stones, he's never going to give you what Walker does going forward from right back. And I know he played centre-back last night, that they changed it again. But the Leipzig game, and then the Palace game, a couple of the league games, he has been playing at right back, but then moving into that Philip Lam style fullback / halfback role. So I think the basic idea of that is Guardiola is very keen, I think, when he's got the ball, to try and have five outfielders behind the ball at all times. Now that will change over the course of a move. It doesn't have to be the same outfielders at all times, and ideally it shouldn't be. You need that fluency, that mobility. But if you have those 5 outfielders in that 3-2 shape, that sort of trapezoid shape, then that is a very solid defensive base. And I think that's something that's actually been true of football going right back to the 1920s. That's what the WM was. You had the back line of 3, then the 2 halfbacks, and that, it turns out, is a really, really solid shape. There's a reason WM endured so long. The difference between what Guardiola does and WM is that the WM was pretty rigid. The players didn't move in and out of those positions, and also there was mirrored by the forward line. So it was a very straightforward. The right back picks up the left winger, the right half picks up the inside left, and so it was based on man-to-man marking. Zonal marking comes in sort of late 50s, early 60s. People realise if you have a back 4, that means the fullbacks can get forward more, gives you greater flexibility and fluidity. But the basic solidity of that shape has always been true. And even Conte's Chelsea, when they played that sort of, we called it sort of a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-4-3. But the wing backs in that were getting forward. They were performing the role that wingers would have done in the WM, but obviously with more defensive responsibility. So that trapezoid base, I think, is something Guardiola's always looked to, or certainly since he went to Bayern, has always looked to. Philip Lam allowed him to do it at Bayern. Cancelo's allowed him to do it at City. And now John Stones is allowing him to do it. I'd be fascinated to know his reasoning for not starting Stones at right back to do it last night. Maybe he thought against good opposition where City weren't going to dominate the ball in the way they often do in league games, where there wasn't going to be 60-65% possession, where it's going to be near 50-50. Maybe he thought just simplify it, have Stones stepping out from centre-back, and Akanji can play as a more orthodox right-back. And I think the other effect of that, which I don't know if it's a sort of unintended consequence, but Ake playing in that more orthodox role, that more defensive role than how Cancelo played, that seems to have liberated Grealish. That Grealish, Grealish himself had said this. Grealish is one of those players who, when he actually gets a chance to talk about football and his role in the side, I think is fascinating, explaining his thought processes. And he has said he found it difficult having a player coming inside him, whereas all the time at Villa was a player overlapping him, whereas Cancelo would come inside, and that then changes Grealish's defensive role as well. And I think one of the things he struggled with last season was to adjust to that new, A, that sense of responsibility, and B, the difference in relationship with his fullback. Ake playing that in a more orthodox way, it means that Grealish can slightly go back to the Villa Grealish. He's still clearly doing much more defensive work than he ever did at Villa, but he's not having to constantly look inside for, is my fullback there? Is that avenue blocked? No, I can come inside now. And I think that's why he's playing better. So it's partly, as with all these things, I think it's partly a sort of top-down theoretical, this is what we're doing, we want to get this 3-2 shape. It's partly to do with personnel and personalities, individuals adapting and adjusting to the situation.
That City 3-2-5 shape in possession, Jonathan, like did Tuchel get his I guess formation correct in dealing with that? It seemed like maybe a 4-2-3-1. He spoke about not getting much sleep in advance of the game. I don't know, should he have slept on the formation a little bit more, because I'm not sure the tactics seem to work against that trapezoid shape that you mentioned.
Oh, I disagree. I think Tuchel got that as I thought Bayern caused City more problems in that first half, or even the first hour, than any other side this year. Packing the forward areas with pace to try and get in behind City. That's where Guardiola sides can be vulnerable. I think the problem wasn't an issue of shape; it was an issue of personnel. Upamecano, we've already talked about he gives away the second goal and then sort of went into this sort of funk for the final quarter of the game. But actually, I think the first goal was really bad individual defending. I'm sure the reasoning of playing the 4-2-3-1, having the two deep lying midfielders there, having Kimmich and Goretzka, was to block up exactly that area where Rodri came through. So I don't know why Rodri was in so much space when he picks up the ball. And I'm sure Tuchel would feel that was a failure of tactics, whether he blame himself for that or whether that's players not following the plan. It's difficult for us as outsiders to know. They can argue about that. But what then happens, I think, is really, really poor. So Musiala obviously panics a bit because he sees Rodri in space, charges across. You don't really blame him for that because somebody's got to put in the challenge. But the pace he's going at means that it's easy for Rodri to turn inside him. And where I think they really let themselves down is that Kimmich is actually there. He's just very, very slow to get out to him. Now, Kimmich should have been moving out even as Musiala's coming over in case sort of the ball pops loose from the challenge or in case Rodri turns inside and the ball's loose. Kimmich should be there to snaffle that, and he's not. And then even then, Rodri has time to line up the shot, and Kimmich's very slow to get out to him, and then he turns his back. And I don't want to sound old football man about turning your back, but don't turn your back. Turning your back makes you smaller. If he'd gone chest onto that, the ball probably still would have gone past him. But the space wouldn't have been as big. It would have been a harder shot for Rodri to take on. So I think Kimmich, well, though he played in other aspects, I think he really, really lets them down on that first goal. And obviously once the first goal's gone in, the whole dynamic of the game changes. So I don't think that's a tactical issue. I think that's individuals failing to fulfill their jobs. And you do wonder, as I said with Upamecano, whether it's an issue with Kimmich that he's so used to Bayern being dominant in the Bundesliga that in that kind of situation, you don't need to get out to the Rodri figure because players playing for Bundesliga clubs can't smack the ball in the top corner from 25 yards. You can afford to give them a little bit more time. But that lack of urgency, that's not a tactical issue. That's just a basic failure, Kimmich failure defending.
So a work ethic thing, because you see Haaland chasing down Sommer and almost getting a goal in the first half, and Grealish, we mentioned earlier as well, kind of blocking off that Upamecano pass for the second goal. So it's when you say an individual thing, it's work ethic. Like the City players were just working harder than the Bayern players.
I think it's work ethic. It's work ethic. You could run 18 kilometres in a game and sort of really put in the miles. Sorry, that's a terrible mixed metaphor. You can really put in the effort and run huge distances in the game. But you've got to be sharp in individual moments. Cowardice is far too strong a word. But you got compare Kimmich's reaction to Rodri getting the space to Diaz when Musiala got the space 2 minutes earlier. And Diaz gets himself out to it, makes himself big. He's facing the player. He's sort of spreading his legs, ready to go either side, and he makes the block. Kimmich half-heartedly turns his back, and where Diaz made his body, twice as big, Kimmich made it half as big. Obviously that's an exaggeration, but that's to do with the basics of defending and courage and alertness.
Yeah.
I'm sure Kimmich's running stats were great for the game, but sometimes it's about putting your body on the line.
John Giles used to talk about moral courage, and that's kind of what he meant. I think that's the perfect encapsulation of it. It does then, because we were having this conversation a little bit earlier on, and I'm not entirely convinced that the game is totally put to bed just yet. I can see a situation where an early goal for Bayern and suddenly it's game on. It's really enthralling second leg. But at the same time, what you're talking about there is that Man City were really at it last night, and that's what they need to be in the Champions League, because there have been games where there hasn't been a clarity of purpose because the team selection was just a little bit different from what they were used to. But that's not the case at the moment. Pep's picking the same team effectively and the same players in roughly the same position, notwithstanding the right back and centre back switch. But everybody knows exactly what their job is, and that, I think, is maybe a little bit different from this part of the season and the early part of the season, and also this team versus previous year's teams.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, how long he can do that, I think, is interesting, because they've still got potentially 15 games to play this season. And that's, if you're an Arsenal fan, I think that's the one thing that gives you hope still, that, before last night, City had twice as many games left to play, potentially twice as many games left to play as Arsenal. Can you keep playing essentially that same 11 or same sort of 12 or 13? Because Mahrez could have come in for Bernardo Silva. But it's minor tweaks. Even the Akanji Stones tweak, it's a basic pattern everybody now understands, and a modification on that is much easier to assimilate for players than a completely new strategy. Can you keep doing that for another 15 games? I don't know. Maybe they can, but that would be the one slight concern, that there might be some fatigue starts coming. Having said that, City's run in the Premier League, apart from the Arsenal game, is pretty straightforward. It's certainly more straightforward than Arsenal's. Arsenal still have to go to Newcastle. City don't have a game anywhere near as hard as that. I think they've both got to play Chelsea at home, but Chelsea these days, certainly Chelsea under Lampard on Saturday were pretty dreadful. So even that probably isn't that tough a game. So I think maybe some of those Premier League games, as we get nearer the end of the season, Guardiola can start to rest players, or do what he's been doing with Haaland anyway, which is get a couple of goals, have half an hour off. And Haaland clearly, I think, has been a little bit frustrated at that he'd like to keep on banging in more and more goals. And I'm sure he'd have had scored even more hat-tricks than he already has if that consideration hadn't been there and he hadn't been being rested for a third of a load of games.
On that, Jonathan, you even see the impact of Julian Alvarez off the bench last night, brilliant again. Will Arsenal fans watching on prefer, do you think, this City team to keep going in the Champions League? They're in the FA Cup as well. Is it a distraction, or because of the strength and depth, does it really matter?
I think if you're an Arsenal fan, you want City to keep going, absolutely, because you want them tired. A distraction, I think... I sort of think distraction is a fair enough word if you're a sort of a team battling relegation. If I don't know, let me think of an example. If this is a long time ago, but Sunderland in 1992, when they got to the cup final as a second flight side, clearly their league form was hammered by the cup run, and they weren't far off being relegated to the third flight that season. And if they hadn't been in the cup, they would have been a comfortable mid-table side. So it was a distraction for them, all the emotional energy going into a small handful of games. I think in the modern game, for teams near the top of the Premier League, you expect to be, if you're in the Premier League title race, Arsenal this season, it's a pretty odd circumstance not to be involved in Europe at this stage. I think it's just something you've got to expect. So I'm not sure distraction is the right word, but clearly it does take a physical toll. The more games you play, the more tired you'll be, the more chances there are of injuries. And, no side is completely immune from injuries. So, De Bruyne went down last night, and it looked, for a couple of minutes, it looked like it might be quite serious. And then you start to think, well, if De Bruyne's out, do they have that same creative intelligence? Maybe not. Maybe it becomes easier for teams to frustrate them. Maybe everybody else has to work a little bit harder. Maybe that does have an impact. As it turned out, De Bruyne was fine. But yeah, they get an injury to Haaland or De Bruyne or Grealish, the way he's playing at the minute, particularly if Foden's not back. Maybe even John Stones or Diaz, the way he played last night. Maybe that does have an impact. So yeah, if you're an Arsenal fan, you want City to keep going. But I think it's more that sort of accumulated fatigue, potential for injuries, rather than being the sort of emotional distraction that we might have talked about with smaller clubs going far in the FA Cup. So
the way that the draw is set up, obviously, for Manchester City, if they go through, they play the winner of the game tonight between Chelsea and Real Madrid. Is this as well set as they've been? Are they as well prepared for what challenges lie ahead in the Champions League as they've ever been under Pep?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of think so, but then they have been really well set before and have just found a way to mess it up. I mean, you think last season, when we were saying pretty much the same thing, that the game against Atletico, they'd shown that sort of intelligence and game management, I guess is the polite way of putting it, that sort of cynicism to win that tie that we hadn't really seen from before. And you sort of thought, oh, okay, yeah, there's this new side to them. And then, yeah, they absolutely batter Real Madrid. They could have won that tie 6-0 over 2 legs and somehow end up losing it. And that was a freakish thing to do with Real Madrid last season, where they could pull out results from nowhere. And also City just mysteriously conceding goals. That first leg particularly, that was never a 4-3 game. That could have been 4-0. And maybe that's, if you think of where the Real Madrid attacks came from in that game, it was Vinicius getting away down the left. And maybe that's where this 3-2 trapezoid defensive shape, maybe that will help to counter that you have that player deeper in a sort of semi right back slot to stop that. But I'm sort of, look, City look great. They looked brilliant last night. They're on this amazing run of form that they scored. Well, they won the last 9 games, scored 30-odd goals in that time, conceded 3. Yeah, they're looking superb, but they have looked superb before and still messed it up. And Real Madrid, I think there is accumulated scar tissue from last season. You don't quite know how that'll play out.
The game tonight, Frank Lampard has been regaling the team with tales from the previous time that a manager who was an interim manager came in and won the tournament. And they've been talking about that. Maybe it works. Maybe that rallying cry is exactly what this team of gifted professionals needed. If they were to be able to pull this out, it would be one of the great shocks that I can remember in world football. It would just be absolutely remarkable. And so we don't expect it. Like, how can they win this game over the 2 legs? What needs to happen?
I mean, they need to get the sort of luck that Chelsea got in 2012. And look, they defended really well in that semi-final against Barcelona. That's the game that sticks in the mind of it just being 2 absurd games of, over the 2 legs, pretty much 178 minutes of constant Barcelona pressure and somehow Barcelona not scoring. I think it's much harder to do that against this Real Madrid than against that Barcelona. Brilliant as that Barcelona were, the thing they were brilliant at was the build-up play. They didn't necessarily have a great finisher. When you've got Benzema in the sort of form he's in, how do you stop him getting chances? Because if he gets chances, he will score. Also, this Real Madrid, they've just got to, and we saw this last season, we saw it against Liverpool, they've got this tremendous capacity not to panic. Whereas Barcelona in 2012, you could see the panic, partly because of what they'd gone through in 2010 against Inter, of we got all the ball, we're having all the chances, we're not scoring, what's going on, why is everything against us? Real Madrid have the exact opposite. They don't need the ball, they don't need chances, they just win games anyway. So I find it almost impossible to see how Chelsea win this game. I think if Potter had still been there was a chance, because the issue with Potter's sides wasn't the defensive side of it, it was taking chances. I thought against Dortmund, although they lost the first leg in Germany, I thought they played really well that night. Most days they'd have won that game. I thought the second leg, very competent, very professional, get the 2 goals. I thought they probably shut up a bit too early, that they could have just kept going, that they ended up inviting a little bit of pressure then. But it was a much more comprehensive win than 2-1 would suggest. And I don't think anybody doubts Graham Potter's capacity to set up a team defensively, to set up a team to thwart an opponent. And this would be exactly that sort of game. And then you hope that João Felix or Havertz or Mason Mount, if he's fit, can do something brilliant to nick you a goal, or you get a goal from set plays, and they've got a lot of big physical players on that side. Lampard, nobody thinks he can set up a team defensively. There's been no evidence of that at all. or not to also offer some kind of attacking threat. I know there's that run in his final season at Chelsea where I think they kept 6 clean sheets in a row, but 3 of those games were drawn 0-0. Watching that game, I mean, I was at Wolves on Saturday, and Chelsea were a shambles that day. And you sort of then, think, does Lampard understand what his role is here? Because he said afterwards, "Oh well, I've only been here a couple of days. I can't sort out all the problems in that time." And you sort of think, no, you're not here to sort out the problems. You're here to sort of hold a hand and take them through at the end of the season, changing the shape and changing how they play, which is what he'd done. They've gone from a back 3 to a back 4. They'd gone to the sort of Chelsea shape that they used when he was a player. Conor Gallagher was being used in the Lampard role, a role I'm sure he'd like Mason Mount to be in if he were fit. Why have you done that? The back 3 was working. The previous 5 games they won 3, drawn 1, lost 1. It wasn't disastrous. Sorry, previous 6 games they'd won 3, drawn 2, lost 1. There was a sense of a system at work. They just weren't taking chances. Why have you ripped all that up? It would make sense if you thought you're going to be here next season and you thought you were building for the future. But that's not his job. His job is just to coax them over the line, and sort of try and regain a bit of momentum. Put a smile back on faces. And so to say I couldn't do anything in 2 days, his entire job is to do something in 2 days. His entire job is to come in and just sort of shake everybody up in the way that Solskjaer did when he came in at United, when he was initially there in the caretaker role. So, I'd be amazed if Chelsea's doing tonight. If your midfield is getting outplayed by Wolves' midfield, how do you expect to compete against Modric and Camavinga and Kroos? It's just not going to happen.
I can't wait to see exactly what he does. Great to have you with us, Jonathan. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
It's great stuff from Jonathan Wilson there this morning. I really am looking forward to Man City, Real Madrid, 2 legs, semi-final. That's exactly what we need.
The only thing against what Jonathan said there, I know Wolves midfield did overwhelm Chelsea's at the weekend, but Mount is back, Kante is back, you have Thiago Silva back. All 3 of them weren't there at the weekend. I'm not saying that's a little modicum of positivity for Chelsea fans, but Lampard used the word escapism in his press conference yesterday, and the Champions League is escapism from all the crap that's going on in the Premier League fund. They're going to finish 11th.
It's not escapism. It's the game.
They've
it's
nothing
the
to
whole
play.
ball game.
Yeah, but they've nothing to play for in the Premier League, so they can focus fully on this.
Then the league is escapism, and this is the business.
Yeah, but it's escapism from the crap in the Premier League. Every game they play is woeful. So
the midfield that he had was Kovacic, Fernandes and Gallagher. So
still strong.
Fernandes 112 million or whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't scrubs. He wasn't picking you.
No, true. But Kante, I'd be up front anyway, Ger. But Kante back in makes a difference.
Kante, excellent player.
I'm not saying they're going to overrun the Real Madrid midfield tonight in the Bernabeu, but yeah, it will be a miracle, as Jonathan says.
Right, Cathal Maloney is with us. Cathal, good morning to you. How are you?
How are you, lads? All well.
What is going on?
Plenty going on. Wish sport in America would start a little bit earlier. That's Leitrim, New York, the Masters, and now the game last night. I mean, we can't sleep.
Not good for this show anyway.
No, it's not. But Ireland played quite well last night, didn't they? But they lost by a goal to 0 to the United States in that second international friendly. Ireland back in action when they play Zambia later on this year in a friendly. Their World Cup opponents, Australia, beat England 2-0 in Brentford. Pretty significant result there for Australia. England's first loss in 30 matches. Nigeria were 3-0 winners over New Zealand. Canada lost 2-1 to France last night. Man City 3-0 winners over Bayern Munich. They've 1 foot in this semi-finals of the Champions League. Inter Milan beat Benfica by 2-0. Tonight, Real Madrid take on Chelsea, as mentioned. That game at 8 o'clock, and the other match tonight is between Napoli and AC Milan. Interesting story from the world of Gaelic games that came out last night, that the 3-time All-Ireland hurling final referee Fergal Horgan has retired from inter-county refereeing with immediate effect. He oversaw finals in 2017, 2020 and 2021, and he announced the news on Tipperary Midwest Radio last night. Quite critical as well. He said he he called the current appointments process a farce, and there's further details on that in some of the papers this morning. In terms of Gaelic games,
so I think this is the big story because as far as I know, you have to retire at 50, right? Is that right? At inter-county level?
Yeah, there used to be, I think that was the rule, yeah, and there's also like a fitness test that you've got to pass as well.
Yeah, when Maurice Deegan, I know in football had was forced to retire because of age. But the fact that Fergal Horgan is alleging here that
I think Fergal Horgan's only 44, so or even younger.
The referees are apparently, according to him, failing fitness tests and still being being given matches. He also has the suggestion that there maybe is a focus on Leinster and Connacht referees in hurling now, that moulding them into top inter-county referees, and because of that, referees in Munster are suffering. But it's concerning when you see a referee of that calibre, as you say, with years left.
From what I gather, very popular with the players as well. And I think Fergal Horgan was subject to a documentary a few years ago when he was mic'd up during a match as well in Croke Park, and it was a great insight into how referees operate during a match. Obviously, referees are such an integral part of the game, and it has been a subject that has been talked about as well in terms of recruitment and trying to get people into refereeing. So I'm not sure where this
he was asked
come from.
Would you recommend getting involved? And he was like, absolutely not, no way. And this is somebody who's had 3 All-Irelands and has absolutely reached the top of the game. You know, it needs to be taken pretty seriously, and we're not going to hear anything from anybody. No one's going to come out and talk about this. There's no one going to come forward and say, well, this is what we're doing, and in this instance, you know, he might have felt a little bit blah blah blah. There's like, you know, but so it'll be interesting to see if the story gets followed up and if there is official communication about it. But any perception there, in light of the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen referees that have gotten appointments that haven't passed the fitness test. That's not going down well among referees. We feel we're not getting a fair crack of the whip in Munster. So it's like, you know, there is a crisis in refereeing in all sports, and it's very difficult to referee hurling. The game at the weekend was savage, and it wasn't even championship intensity. So here's one of your best referees now unavailable for the rest of the championship. It's like,
there's no incentive. Like, you know, people could go into schools. There's probably so many kids in Irish schools who love hurling or Gaelic football or soccer, but they're maybe not as talented at the sport in terms of playing it as some of their peers. But there is an avenue there to still be involved in the game through refereeing. I know it's a tough industry, if you want to call it that, to get into, but there needs to be more incentive for young people to even try out refereeing. You mightn't like it, but
and so he was a successful hurler in his time, played inter-county with Tip all the way up until he left to go to England, and then came back and I think played whatever the intermediate All-Ireland grade was called. And so, like, is steeped in the game, you know, and is exactly has exactly the type of profile if you want of somebody getting involved. So we'll try and talk to him and get him on. It was a local radio interview that he did. So definitely interested to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, interesting story, and as you say, there might be more on that. Just in some other Gaelic games news, Meath and Kildare both through to the semi-finals of the Leinster Under-20 Football Championship. They had wins over Westmeath and Louth respectively last night, and there is a 7-race card at Gorham Park today, the first off there at 4:10.
All right, it's 8:51 this morning. You're watching OTB AM. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 087 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, and you can always get us 087 918 180, or you can get us on youtube.com/off the ball. Who do you want to win the Champions League?
Napoli. I mean, I want to see Napoli win it. I think Real will win it, but certainly Napoli is the...
And as a Man United fan, Pep Guardiola winning it is the worst possible outcome, is it?
I think for all Premier League fans, I think it's not just a Manchester thing. I think Guardiola has that smugness.
I know.
But then he's...
I think if... It's good for the Premier League, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not like he hasn't won the Champions League before. I know this whole massive deal is made of the Man City thing, but I just love a fairy tale. You know, like a Porto Monaco final that time. We're not going to get that final because there's a heavily weighted side of the draw.
No, that was terrible.
But Napoli, terrible. Well, but we all still remember it years later.
The Jose Mourinho winning was not really, and it ended up not being that good for the game at all.
That's before we knew Jose was Jose.
Well, I mean, if you paid attention to like Martin O'Neill knew after the Celtic final the previous year.
Yeah. Potentially, yeah. He hadn't grown into his own yet, Jose. But a little Napoli victory will be brilliant.
I think, in fairness, Napoli winning would also be good. 8:52 this morning. Keith Wood is with us. Keith, good morning to you. How are you?
Very good, Ger. How are you?
I'm very well. You've dressed up for us. Thanks very much.
I thought you deserved it this morning.
I kind of don't want to talk about this, but I kind of do. The backlash against Leinster is interesting, and it's gathering pace. We had Wigglesworth the weekend talking about the money. The money is the thing here. It's like, okay, who did you play for before? Anyway, and then it's the home semi-final yesterday. Brian Moore saying there should be no home semi-finals and finals. I kind of agree a little bit, but like the horse bolted on that. Everybody knows where the competition is going to be. So is there anything in this that we as a rugby country need to be aware of, that actually, you know, when everybody's coming at you, sometimes you do need to listen to what they're saying to see if there's a credible argument being made that actually this is unsustainable or we're doing something wrong? What's your instinct?
My instinct on this is Leinster haven't won the Heineken Cup for a few years, and if they were winning it year in, year out, some of these arguments might be able to stand up, but they're in a rich vein of form. I thought Brian Moore's article was quite whining yesterday. I like a lot of his stuff, actually, and I like Brian. And there is an advantage of playing at home all the time, but a lot of that stems from the fact that Leinster have had an incredibly high level of performance since the start of the season, and the look of the draw in terms of the final being in the Aviva. That's not down to Leinster, and that just happens to be this circumstance. So next year it won't be that way, whatever way it works, though they could have a lot of home games up until that point. On the financial side of it, I think they are in a very good position. They have plenty of backing. They have huge crowds, and that's the nature of it, and look, I keep going back every now and then. I thought the European competition was heavily weighted towards Ireland, and I thought that the manner in which the French and the English teams tried to manoeuvre the tournament, there made some bit of sense for that to happen, but I think they made an absolute balls of it. And as we've seen, because it changes every couple of years, they're going to change it back next year, and I don't know whether that's exactly right either. But it just feels everybody complains if they don't win all the time, and that's just what it seems like. For the last 3 weeks, that has seen, for me, poor show.
Dan McFarlane talking about demographics was also interesting. It's true that Leinster houses Dublin, which is the capital city and has the biggest population, but the population of County Antrim and County Down combined is like 1.3 million. And also, Ulster Rugby has a long and storied tradition of producing players and has access to capital if they want it. So just felt, one of the things Gordon Darcy says today is that it gives everybody who's playing for those teams just a little bit of wiggle room. Not actually our fault. It's this everybody knows the dice is loaded, everybody knows the game is rigged. It's like it's not true.
Everybody knows Leonard Cohen. I don't know whether it gives them wiggle room. It gives them an excuse, almost. Not an excuse, that's harsh. I think Ulster struggled this year against Leinster. Most teams have struggled against Leinster, and without Leinster, I think Ulster could have won an awful lot more, and it's gone against them for the last few years. But we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. It goes in cycles, and what I would say, and what I would be not envious of, but I'd be really interested and have been interested in watching, is that Leinster haven't taken anything for granted in that period of time, and they're consistently looking at coaching being the biggest driver of their performance. So they're consistently looking for different types of coaches, different thinking in coaches. So when somebody goes and leaves, they tend to bring somebody who isn't trying to replicate the same, but is trying to maybe drive it in a very slightly different direction. And that's the bit that's been most impressive from Leinster, is that they're playing a more, call it a more rounded game, but a more innovative game. There's something different happens all the time. Even if you go back to the start of this season, when the change in the laws for holding the ball up came on, they suddenly started having tap and go again. There's always the things that have happened. I always say it's cycles. These things happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. But they're novel and they haven't been used for 20 years. So it looks like they keep looking to the past, how to do things differently. They keep bringing different coaches in who are looking to think differently. I think that's impressive. And you can complain and bemoan that all you like, or you can get on with doing the job. The problem is it takes a period of time for that job to change and to bear proper fruit. And I actually think Ulster were really, really close earlier on in the season, and I think they got a huge knockback. And but I still think that they have the makings of a very good team. The other teams are maybe further back.
This narrative around Leinster, Keith, is this just a narrative that crops up, as you say, in cycles in sport every now and again? Like what Wigglesworth and McFarland and Moore and these lads are saying, you know, when you think of the Kerry team in the 80s or the Limerick hurling team at the moment, or even your great Munster team, is this just a narrative that crops up that teams look for, I guess, not excuses, but ways in which they can rationalise a team's success?
Well, I think it's funny. It's interesting watching the golf at the weekend and watching Brooks Koepka and coming back and watching that Netflix period. And everybody talks about money, you know, and in golf, the amount of money is crazy. But all he wants is to win. So winning is the thing that drives everybody, and to the exclusion of all else for an awful lot. And it's interesting if you just can't seem to get yourself in that position. But like I do look at Leinster at the moment, but I also look at some of the other teams that are left in the Heineken Cup competition. They're extraordinary. So we've got to the point of where the best teams are in the last four, you know, and to say that it's a preordained that Leinster will definitely win is wrong. You know, they will have to play at their absolute best. Though, as it turns out, they have the benefit of playing at home for the next two matches if they get to both of them.
Yeah, it's funny. Toulouse obviously have long prided themselves on bringing the best local and young players through and bedding them into the team. Obviously, they've supplemented that with world-class stars from around. But the homegrown nature of Leinster's players is something that I think sometimes we take a little bit for granted because the school system has so much money slushing around. To get those players from the school system where there's less, and again Darcy's talking about this today, less impetus on the set piece than there is when you get to the professional game. We know in other sports how difficult it is for, you know, what are supposedly world-class talent at under 17, under 19 and under 21 to make it to the senior professional game. All sorts of reasons players drop out. The coaching of the senior team at Leinster, a lot of the credit has gone to Lancaster for that. But if you look at the other coaches over the years who've been part of that, every time somebody leaves, like Felipe Contepomi has left, and they've managed to replace it with somebody who they think is going to be even better or add something else to the setup. I do think sometimes we just take Leo Cullen for granted. That like, yeah, he's got a really straightforward, easy job. But it's the opposite of that. And the whole thing about it's like, it's basically Ireland in blue. Well, Ireland is basically Leinster in green. And that's the way that if I was, you know, to step back from this, you've got to give Leo Cullen the credit for a lot of that, surely.
100%. I think he never gets the credit for it. And I think one of the lines I used last week about Munster was who holds the keys to the team. And if you look at Leinster, you can say for, I don't know how many years it is now, but Leo Cullen has held the keys. And that's the long-term view that is consistently required. So you can have other coaches in doing a huge amount of the work, but you also need to have somebody at the helm. And he is at the helm and has been consistently. And he's also managed to do it by being very confident in arguing the case when any of those comments come up. And but he's also been really, really confident in his own position to be able to shine the light on the qualities of the coaches and players around him. And he is at the helm, but it's not about him. And that's been I think he's managed to do that really, really lightly. And I think it's incredibly reassuring to players and fans alike.
That gap, Keith, between Leinster and the other provinces, like, do you feel like that's closing? It's not closing on the pitch based on what we've seen this season, but anecdotally, even off the pitch, in terms of resources and infrastructure, is it getting little bit narrower?
I'm not sure. The resources bit is a little bit different. It's exactly how, you know, how much money you've at your disposal is a conversation piece. Of course it is. But for me, it's how those resources are used, and they're used over a period of time. And that's the piece for me that marks out as being different from Leinster, from the others. So you have a lot of young players coming through the system from a very competitive schools system. And I know that the Leinster rugby have tried really hard to get far more through from the country counties. and outside of the private school system, and they're being successful in doing so. So they're able to invest along those lines as well, and that gives them a sort of an additional fillip, and will do down the line. But for me, it's how they seem to get those players playing on the right level and maximising them, consistently over a period of time. And like the one thing that sticks out for me for the teams that they're sending down to South Africa this weekend is they've Sam Prendergast there, having come back from the 20s, having shown an ability, which is in 20s an entirely different type of rugby, and it's very fast, very quick, far more, I won't say risk oriented, but there's mistakes going to be made. A lot more mistakes are going to be made in that than are going to be made further up the line. But it shows the possibility of some of the players. There was a guy who didn't look under any pressure in any way, shape or form. And so at the first available opportunity, I know Leinster have the benefit of not having to win any more games in the URC, and they can send out all the other players to it. But it's an opportunity for a guy to suddenly see what's happening for him, and to see how he fits into the style of playing against huge teams. They take the opportunity really well, and they take it very early. And I think they take it earlier than the Munster, definitely. Not quite so much as Ulster. I think Ulster put their players in quite early as well.
Is that a cultural thing, and does that culture need to shift? I suppose to peel it back one layer, it does feel as if Munster have been going over the last couple of years to get the right people in the right places. They've got they seem to have got the academy situation sorted in a way that makes sense, and that does have some long-term thinking about it, just in going and getting somebody who is familiar with their system back in to be in charge of the academy, and who
it's
is
funny, you're looking at different teams doing things in a different way. So if you look at Connacht and you look at how they deal with their under 17s or under 18s, once they bring their group of players together, they tend to hold them together, and they train together as much as they possibly can, because there isn't a huge number of clubs up in Connacht, and it just means if you can tidy them all in together, you can maximise the skill component. When you look at Leinster, the reason Leinster are able to pick players that are coming out of schools pretty quickly is because they tend to have been in a far more professional environment at schools level, so they're probably ready earlier. So the requirement then is on the provinces to try and do something different that's unique for that province, for their own province. It isn't about emulating what happens elsewhere, but try and see what they can do to maximise the skill, the talent, the training of the players that they have. They are the structures that are beginning to change. There are a lot of young coaches now in Munster, not in the first tier. Yes, they are, with Prendergast coming back and Leamy. But on the layer below that, and the level below that, there's a lot of young coaches, past players, a mixture of coaches and players that have the energy to be able to go and sort of engender that. Maybe that change within those young guys that are coming through. So I do think it's happening. It's hard when it's happening in the full light of your neighbour who seems to have everything just right for them. But it takes a period. It just takes a period of time. So for me, I looked at this season. Again, from a Munster perspective, I looked at this season and said, well, whatever Munster get to do, it's the start of a proper change. And what they need is a sense of consistency for 4, 5 or 6 years. No, I'm not talking about consistency, not winning well, but consistency where there are long-term strategic plans that are being brought in to improve the rugby over that period of time and improve the team. That's incredibly hard in the white hot of competition, where if they lose the next 2 matches, they may not be in the URC, or they may not be in the ERC next year, and that's very tough. And they're under pressure all the time. So you can understand that level of pressure and stress that's on them, but the long-term view is still something that has to be resolved and can't be shooting from the hip, just changing at will. You know, you have to have something that is consistent for that period of time. And I think more changes still need to be made.
We're obviously, Keith, hugely looking forward to those two semi-finals, like Leinster, Toulouse and La Rochelle, Exeter. Both should be cracking games. Having said that, the tournament as a whole, the Champions Cup, I mean, someone made the point in the show yesterday about the All-Ireland football series. You know, if there were 4 one-sided quarterfinals like we had essentially in the Champions Cup, people will be questioning the tournament as a whole. So is that a concern, that we have to wait until the last 4 to really get the matchups we want?
Yeah, I think there have been great matchups during it, but I think they've been few and far between. And I just think the structure that was in place this year was, you didn't have to play particularly well to qualify. Everybody seemed to qualify, and then suddenly the realization is that all the home teams win in the round of 16 and the round of 8. So actually, if that realization doesn't hit home for next year, that you do have to make certain that you do as well in the pool games as you possibly can. For me, I still look at this season and think it is far too congested, and there are too many matches, too much travelling, trying to understand the finances almost of how to make this sport work. It does not happen by filling every weekend of the year from mid-August to June or July. It just doesn't. You know, it's pretty relentless, and we say that all the time. But the way of getting more money is to play another match or have another competition or have 2 or 3 other rounds into it. And for me, that becomes unsustainable because the size of the squads have become too big to be able to cater for that. So that's not viable. So I still think the game is in a tightrope situation where it's incredibly difficult for teams to be able to have that amount of players playing, and I think it's becoming very, very tough. But so you want the best at the end of the season. You want players absolutely vying to play at the best they possibly can, and like you are looking at a team like Leinster saying that they're putting out a second or third team and keeping their team at home for 2 weeks. So going down to South Africa for 2 weeks before semi-finals and maybe quarter-finals, it's kind of crazy, really, you know. So, I don't know. I'm kind of a little bit bemused by the way the game has gone actually since COVID.
All right. Well, look, we might get into that in a bit more detail as the season wraps up. But for now, we've got to leave it there. Keith, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers, gents.
It's Keith Wood giving us his general thoughts on the situation at the moment. The 4 games this weekend: Ulster Dragons Friday night 7:35, Lions versus Leinster on Saturday at 3 o'clock, Stormers Munster is such a big game on Saturday at 5:15, and Connacht Cardiff on Saturday at 7:35. We'll preview that game in more detail on Friday with Quinny here on OTB AM. In the meantime, though, it is 12 minutes past 9. We're live each morning with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night edition is available now. Here's some highlights on the OTB Podcast Network for you. Football show, Pat Nevin on that one for you at the moment. Roy McIlroy features on a slight tangent this week. And we also have Colin Boyle talking about the capitulation of Mayo to Roscommon in the Connacht Championship and whether or not ultimately it's going to end up being that big a deal. We shall find out what it means for their situation in the power rankings in just a moment, because that's what's next with Tommy Rooney. But in the ad break, you're going to hear a bit from the football pod, because they're on the road again, heading to Killarney for the first big road show of the summer, thanks to AIB. Tommy, Paddy and James will be bringing the football pod to the Great Southern Hotel for a live episode with special guests on Thursday the 4th of May. It's an exclusive off-air event. Tickets are limited, so don't delay. Go to offtheball.com/events. It's all in partnership with AIB. Check out the hashtag the toughest for more. And during the ad break, Roscommon are the new Atletico Madrid. That's the last.
You're listening
to OTB AM.
OTB Rugby.
It looked like the Sharks put the heating on in the dressing room. You know, it looked like they came out of a sauna at half time. I've never seen players so beaten coming out of a dressing room.
I'm not a big fan of the South African team being in the European Cup. The trick is in the name. You can see that one part doesn't fit into the other. I do think they've brought a huge amount of style and some fantastic rugby to it.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
Of all the top teams, they're probably the easiest to frustrate. You feel Mayo, when the game is free-flowing, they are brilliant. And they've shown that through all the National League. They were top class. But when the game is slowed down, and Roscommon were like the Atletico Madrid of GAA yesterday, it was a brilliant performance from them. A game plan from Davy Burke and Mark McHugh executed to an absolute T. Mayo struggled against that. They only scored a point from play in the first half with a massive wind. And you could see with each minute of that game going by, they were getting more and more frustrated. And Mayo, in situations like that, if they are going to win the All-Ireland, they can't expect every game they play to be 100 miles an hour. They need to get better. And they learned a lot from that game yesterday of playing against that, a stop-start game, playing against bodies back. Roscommon play the game on their terms. Frustrate Mayo, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. And I would have been Roscommon's harshest critic over the years on this pod of having really good technical players, which they've always had, but being easy to play against. That was not a nice game for Mayo to play yesterday.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Some of these critics, these pundits.
Generally speaking, I'd be a fan of Off the Ball. Exactly, and like Tommy knows his football, obviously I listen to football pod the odd time. And
when I was looking at the power rankings, and I thought that Jesus Owen must still be feeling the effects of these mushrooms.
But they just dismiss you like you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
So, does Tommy know his football? How did you get on last week, Tommy, with your power rankings? Did anything happen at the weekend to maybe cause you to doubt the very fibre of your being?
Well, they caused discussion, lads. I'll put it to you that way. Couple of roars from Roscommon fans over the weekend. A couple of Mayo people asking me to, just relax a little bit. Like, what's the story? And then I think there was a Galway man who just wasn't happy. Just was not happy. He's like Bailey at the minute. He's giving out there for some reason. So yeah.
What were the Mayo people wanted you to relax, as in, take us off the pedestal, stop hyping us up?
And I'm not sure if they wanted us to relax. I think they just thought maybe it was a little bit quick to put us into number 2. But so, look it. Everyone has different agendas when it comes to the power rankings. I think I am the only neutral person in this country.
Okay. Are we going to horse through the back to front?
Yes.
Last week we started with the first one, but we might go back to start with the first one next week. But this week, because of what happened, we have a new entry, and so we're going to start with that.
We are going to start with that, yeah. And I'm going to have to let the dog out, lads, because
I'll read through this page for you.
Do you go through the back page? Okay. New York have entered on 26.
Right. So 33 is London, 32 is Waterford, 31 is Carlow, 30 is Wexford, 29 is Tipperary, 29 is Tipperary, 28 is Longford. Yeah, that's what we have. Leitrim are down 2 to 27. New York, new entry, brand new entry. This feels like Top of the Pops in the 1990s.
Yeah.
Brand new entry, straight into number 26. It's New York.
And I'll tell you what.
With their Bronx rockin' beats.
If they had another game at home, lads, you'd be backing them to win. Like, they have got a quality outfit together over there in New York. They have kept the same team together. Really good game on Saturday night. That final score to equalise the game in the
76th.
The 7th minute of injury time. Cracker. That was the score. The Dubs, the 6 in a row Dubs that they've been proud of. They went down one wing. They kept the ball. 16 passes over 50 seconds. They switched the play. Owen Kerrin slips it into Shane Carty, who backtracked into 10 yards of space, and he curled it over the bar on his left. Quality stuff. We keep going.
Leisure up 1 after a big win for them after a tricky end of the league campaign. So they're on 25, and Jojo's just wondering, where's the New York in Ireland as we get first page gone. Second page, no changes here, right?
No changes in the second page, no.
Wicklow, good win at the weekend, but no change. 24, Sligo 23, Antrim 22. Would you have Wicklow ahead of Antrim at this stage?
We'll see what happens next weekend when Wicklow take on Kildare in 2 weeks. We'll see what happens there.
Limerick 21, Offaly 20, Down 19, Fermanagh 18, Westmeath 17. I think you just didn't make any changes to these because you couldn't be dealing with the hassle from the so-called weaker counties.
That's not true. We have plenty of games to come over this month. There was nothing more changing so far.
All right. Meath 16, Cavan 15, Kildare 14, Cork are 13, still ahead of Kildare, Cavan and Meath. even though they're out of the championship now. I suppose because they're ahead of them.
Well, they're not out of the championship, Ger.
Sorry, they're out of the Munster Championship, and I suppose they are actually ahead of Kildare in the league table. So anyway, Cork down 2 at 13, Louth unchanged at 12, Clare up 2 to 11, even though they're not yet in Sam Maguire.
Tommy knows what side his bread's buttered here. Clare up 2.
Donegal 10 and Monaghan 9.
It was just a big win. I think it just corrected what we would have seen in the league campaign. A couple of results just didn't go Clare's way. Cork, I think Cork deserved to be 13th. Like, Mayo's game management the weekend was incredibly poor. Cork did some stuff that was really good and really poor as well throughout that game. Clare were fully deserved winners.
I think we need a correction here where, like, Westmeath are in Sam Maguire, and so they are at least 16.
I think it'll all correct itself, lads, over the next 3 weeks. There's still another 20-odd championship games to go this month. We have a lot of football to be played until 4 counties are knocked out altogether. So we can just relax a little bit here.
Okay.
It's a bit of shadow boxing. It's like the bloody league.
Clare
Davy Burke
11th.
said after the game, lads. Davy Burke said after the game that when he sat down with the Roscommon boys, Donny Smith said to him, Easter Sunday, we'll be ready. And I stood there thinking, what's been the point of the first 6 bloody power rankings if all they're thinking about is Easter Sunday?
Well, I suppose we had to see the evolution of a team that was capable of doing what they did and backing it up.
Clearly Roscommon were ready for the first 3 league games as well, so it wasn't just Easter Sunday they were prepping for. Who would you, so Westmeath are 17th, who would you have below that are ahead of them? Who would you take out? Like, you can't have Cavan are there in merit, I think. Meath above them in 16th.
Well, Cavan, I think it's 50-50 about Cavan, less than 50-50.
But the Super League campaign though. Division 3 albeit.
They're not guaranteed a place in Sam Maguire yet.
Like, are you just taking turns recycling through complaints that have been directed my way over the last 4 or 5 weeks?
But it's usually Cavan lads complaining.
I'm sure it's correct. Let's move on.
Okay.
So you had Monaghan at 9. Now we get into the first page. Armagh down a point, even though I thought they had like an effortless victory with some of their best players not playing. That's what I heard.
They had a good win.
Armagh are 8.
They had a good win against Antrim, who are 22nd in the power rankings.
All right.
So they did nothing wrong, but it was the fact that Mayo lost to Roscommon. The Roscommon bet the second team in the power rankings from 8th position.
Well,
they deserved it, and that wasn't to belittle where Roscommon are at. They were 3rd in the league, but now they've jumped up into 7th place.
So Armagh are 8, Roscommon are 7, Tyrone unchanged at 6, Derry still at 5, clinging on in there, Dublin are 4, Mayo are on 3, Galway are on 2, up 1, Mayo are down 1 to 3. Still the 3rd best team in the country according to Tommy Rooney. And Kerry,
they just won the league, lads.
Kerry are what did it matter?
No, but hold on. Mayo have won the league.
They have.
They've got to kick up the arse.
Okay.
The hype train has been deflated a little bit.
Yeah.
They now have 6 weeks. They might take a little bit of a break this week. 5 weeks to get themselves ready for whoever they face in the All-Ireland round.
Are they getting Lushy and Mullen back in that 5 weeks, Tommy? Is that what's going to happen here now?
No, but I will make one point, and I should have put it the next day after the game. Mayo didn't play Sam Callanan, who had started the league final for them. And I think Sam Callanan would have suited to start Sam Callanan in that game. He had under-20s championship this week. They didn't play Bob Toohey, and Roscommon completely bet them in midfield. I also think it would have suited that game to play Bob Toohey rather than a Tommy Conroy. It would have suited the style of game. Bring in Conroy the way he should have been coming in, which is with 15 minutes to go alongside Kieran O'Connor, because he's not ready yet. So this is going to give them time to get ready. But let's just not talk too much about Mayo this week. Let's just not talk too much about them. Because
I'm actually see the little red -1. Now you see it usually beside teams that have had a defeat. So it's beside Armagh. Does that make a laughing stock of the power rankings, generally speaking, when you have a team that wins a match and then goes down a place?
It makes a laughing stock of the provincial championship, Shane. That's what I'd say. Because what do they matter at the minute? Do you know? Like, what do they really matter? Where's the jeopardy gone? The jeopardy was on Saturday night because history was on the line between New York and Leitrim. New York were chasing history. That's why that game mattered so much, and there was so much made about it. Like, what mattered then in Clare and Cork? Well, Clare need to win 2 games to stay into Sam Maguire. They've beaten Cork. They now need to beat Limerick to stay in there. One of Limerick and Clare are going to be into Sam Maguire. So the jeopardy is actually put on Meath, who are now in serious bother. Meath have to reach the Leinster final to play into Sam Maguire. In Mayo and Roscommon, what was the jeopardy? Pride. Like, there was more jeopardy in the stands, I'd say, than there was in the pitch between the rival supporters.
So that is now confirmed after the results of the weekend. Meath do now need to reach the Leinster final to reach the Sam Maguire.
100% confirmed.
So they have to beat Louth, basically.
No, they have to beat Offaly.
And then
beat Longford. So Offaly are coming in fairly well cooked, got over the line against Longford. Longford took the lead with 10 minutes to go in that game. You talk about jeopardy, lads, and the Leinster final. Paddy Christie obviously went all out to win that game at Longford at the weekend. They're off in a 4-day training camp to Portugal this week, regardless of how that result went. So teams aren't really looking at the provincial championship as the end all and be all anymore. They are now looking at the All-Ireland round robin series, and whenever they get there. And McStay said it after the game, and there's a little bit of him possibly managing the narrative when he said, look, we came into this game as third seeds, the same as Roscommon, the same as Galway. We're all still third seeds. So one of those teams, Galway and Roscommon, are going to be third seeds in the All-Ireland round robin series. One of them is going to be a first or second seed, because only one of them can get to the Connacht final.
Yeah, and even then, I still think that ultimately they're going to be two of those teams who might be third seeds. Both will end up at worst in the preliminary quarterfinal wildcard weekend. It's gonna take off.
A lot of unknowns.
Yeah. Well, look, maybe Derry's performance in the league final was vanilla, and it was vanilla because they'd no McCaig, and as soon as there was a Conor Glass tweak of the hamstring, they were like, okay, off you come, and we don't see the real Derry until later in the season.
Fermanagh this weekend, which is not the easiest of games either, Tommy. Like, I mean,
absolutely not.
Derry should win that match, but Fermanagh are on a bit of a high as well.
Yeah, and interesting, Kirk, as well. The pitch in Fermanagh, they played all their away games in the league. They didn't play in Brewster Park. You know, the Brewster Park pitch has been redeveloped. So I think there's a bit of surprise that the game is set for Brewster Park this week. So maybe keep an eye on the playing surface between Derry and Fermanagh on Saturday. If it does get played there, it'll be the first game there. Derry should be fine, but Fermanagh had a brilliant league campaign. Cavan tied down Ultan Kelm. I think that's key. Cavan tied down Ultan Kelm in the league final quite well at Pádraig Faulkner. And you'd imagine Derry have enough man markers to quench the threats that Fermanagh have, but you never know. Tyrone found it difficult against Fermanagh last year. Took a brilliant goal from Conor Myler to kind of spark that game. So that's going to be a good game. Monaghan Tyrone as well. Shane, like, how are you feeling going into this game? On the football pod, the lads couldn't get away from it. They leant so heavily on Conor McManus and McCarron, and whether or not those two boys could get the job done. We're still talking about McManus at 35 years of age being that bit of gold dust that Monaghan need. He obviously did it in the last league game against Mayo. What's the word on Vinnie Corey's boys?
Look, I think that definitely the reliance on McManus in that last game was there for all to see, but you have players like Stevie O'Hanlon, who wasn't involved last year, took a year away, and back in this year. Micheál Bannigan has been given the vice captaincy, I think, this year as well, and stepped up really as a leader. Conor McCarthy back to his best a little bit as well. So I think they are pitching in with more and more scores. Obviously McManus is going to spearhead that, but that's going to be a fascinating game. And Monaghan tend to have a better record, nearly an Oma against
4 o'clock on Sunday, that game.
That's going to be a cracker.
Look, it's going to be a good game, but ultimately, as Tommy keeps pointing out, does it really matter?
Yeah.
I think Tyrone are too low. I said it last week. I think
too low. Okay.
Yeah, I think Tyrone should be ahead of Derry. I think
this weekend will change that.
Like, after what you watched throughout the spring.
Yeah, because Tyrone had a turnaround and got back to some sense of form and organisation and a re-emergence of an identity, and they're playing Division 1 teams. I saw Derry wipe the floor with Meath, and I thought, wow, this team is super impressive. And then I realised that Meath are paper thin, and so it's very difficult for me to read too much into that. And the first time I saw Derry, they played Dublin twice, and they played really well against them one day, and they played really badly against them the second time. So maybe
they played really well in the first half. They were right in that game
until the square ball goal.
Like, you know,
a bit flaky for them to collapse.
Collapse. They were missing Glass and McCaig. They're obviously thin on the ground in Derry, and we do think they have limitations. Like we've said that on the power rankings, we do think they have limitations to get beyond the last 4.
Tyrone's ceiling is higher than Derry's.
I'm not sure if that's the case. I really am not sure that's the case. And I'm going to get accused of some weird anti-Tyrone bias. I love Tyrone football. I'm their biggest fan. And like Paddy Andrews described Roscommon as the Atletico Madrid of Gaelic football of the weekend. Tyrone mightn't be happy with that themselves. Like, I genuinely think Tyrone don't have the depth they had when they won that All-Ireland in 2021. They don't have that X factor off the bench. I don't think they're there yet. I think they can get there. because of the strength of Tyrone football.
Okay.
But I just don't see it at the minute, Ger.
Let me put it to you like this. It's All-Ireland semi-final day and it's Tyrone, Kerry, or it's Derry, Kerry. Who do you give the most chance of upsetting Kerry?
I don't know. I really don't. Like 5th or 6th, that's where I have them in the power rankings.
Derry flying high in the summer, you just never know. They get into their stride. So that 5, 6, 7 could change around. You've got Roscommon 7, Tyrone 6, Derry 5. Like Derry and Tyrone both play this weekend. So depending on those results, Tommy, that could swing, and Roscommon could move up even.
I don't see it swinging too much yet. Like Ger's question there about the All-Ireland semi-finals. It's just so hard to know where these teams are at and where they're going to be in 6 weeks' time. Like, it really is.
We will obviously have a lot more information on how teams are going, and if it turns out the Canavans are both like scoring 2-3 a game each, by that stage you'd be like, oh, they've got plenty of X factor. They don't actually need anybody off the bench.
Sure. And I'll hold my hands up. And I will say, Ger, as well, you know, on social media or whatever, it can tell a lie. I felt last week that a lot of the reaction to your Dublin prediction on social media was, what's Ger on about here? What have the Dubs shown us? When I was out and about during the week last week, a lot of people agree with you. A lot of people think that Ger Gilroy is right, and it was a very smart call, and that the Dubs should be in second place in the power rankings. I don't see it yet, but you know, they're not far off it.
A question for you both. Kildare play Wicklow. Netwatch Cullen Park, that's the weekend after this, and Meath, as you say, Tommy, play Offaly, and then those semi-finals. So it's going to be the winner of Kildare Wicklow against the winner of Dublin Laois, and then Meath or Offaly against Westmeath or Louth. Comment in from Shane, not myself, on YouTube. Will Tommy and Ger get behind their team's Tailteann Cup games?
Kildare are going to be safe, I think.
You should be safe, but hypothetically speaking, it's probably more pertinent for you, Tommy.
I think Kildare and bother if Meath get to the Leinster final, which is a big if. Like, there's a lot of ifs at the minute. Like, are you playing
a lot of ifs, a lot of buts?
Yeah, a bit of both. Are you going to the Tailteann Cup games with your?
What have you?
My weekends are dictated. And I got a comment during the week that I was the most plastic Meath man on the internet. It was by Irish Catholic on TikTok.
Very good.
And I looked at the comment and I asked myself, is that because of my accent? Is that because I'm playing my club football down in Clare? Is it because my garden's in Cavan? Is it because I went to school in Monaghan? Is it because I was born in the States? Like, why would I be the most plastic Meath man? And it turned out it was because I don't go to Meath games at the weekend. Well, Irish Catholic, off the ball decide where I go at the weekend to games. So, you know, Shane, when I get behind Meath in the Tailteann Cup, I will watch every game. I followed the 20s game last night. I will follow them closely.
I think
I may not get to go to them unless Nathan Murphy gives me the nod.
Well, I was going to say, I think that if Meath are in the Tailteann Cup this year, we will absolutely do everything. I will move heaven and earth to make sure you're at that game to be able to report on it.
Thanks, Ger. And if they are in the Tailteann Cup, they deserve to be in the Tailteann Cup. And that is just the way it is. Like, there's a very young Meath team there at the minute. I think for Meath, I don't know. I don't think they want to be in the Tailteann Cup. They want to play in a round robin All Ireland series. But for some of the younger players, maybe that's okay. For Kildare and Clare, the profile of those teams, it wasn't going to be a good thing. So Clare have one more game against Limerick now. They've got to get that right. They lost in penalties last year.
Well, I was going to say,
you know I was there.
I'd say Limerick are absolutely delighted about the fact that Clare came through that game.
I'd say Limerick have been quietly just focusing on this ever since they respectfully asked Ray Dempsey to go.
So I think there's a good chance of an After the Lord Mayor show performance where Clare gets sucked into a dogfight and don't come through that side. And again, that would be a bit of a disaster for the championship because I don't think Limerick are ready for Sam Maguire competition just yet. You know, the opposite side of that is if you're in the Tailteann Cup, you deserve to be in it. Sometimes some teams are actually going to be in Sam Maguire who don't deserve to be in it because they haven't actually built. And so we'll see.
Well, just one last thing on that, because Michael Dorgan, who does the Long Haul podcast with Johnny Kennedy, he had a load of great interviews after the game. They're well worth checking out on YouTube. And he had an interview with Shane Carty of New York, 2-time Dublin All-Ireland winner. And Carty said he could see the complacency in the Leitrim players' eyes at the weekend. And I found that hard to believe because New York have brought Roscommon to a point, brought Leitrim to extra time, retained most of their squad last year that brought Sligo to 4 points. Everyone talked about the players that New York got over the line in the last 2 weeks. Bill Maher, Owen Cairns, the last 2 weeks before the deadline, the transfer deadline. Andy Moran was part of a London team, a Mayo team that nearly lost to London in James Horan's first year. The management can get teams ready to a certain extent. The Clare managers and the players lost to Limerick last year on penalties. So that complacency really cannot exist looking on from the outside. But if Shane Carty could smell it, if he could see it in the eyes, you know, you can't take anything for granted.
No,
you just can't.
I do still think the Dubs are way too low. I think Tyrone are too low, and I think I don't know. After that, yeah, like I still think there's a good chance Mayo are in the All Ireland semi-final. I'm a bit less sure of that after the quality of the performance and their inability to adapt. But as you say, they have 4.5 weeks now of absolute hell for leather and training. You know, Cillian O'Connor gets more fit, Carr gets fit, and a few others who they had some doubts about get a bit of game time and a bit of this is exactly what we're trying to do. So and the under-20s, as you pointed out, are all going to be available for selection as well. So Tommy, a lot of
football to go. Just going to say, I've been there, Ger, in the perch that you're on, sitting there throwing little jabs and punches, and it's very easy. Like I've serious respect for what Owen Sheehan's gone through over the last couple of years. It's a big can to carry, these power rankings.
It's a weight on your shoulders, Tommy. You carry it well.
Yeah, it really is.
Do you have anything? Do you want to comment on the fact that you were threatening him and his family and forced him to flee the jurisdiction so you could take the seat? And now that you have it, you don't even want it.
I don't think Owen need much of a push to go to South America. So that wasn't.
That is. And sorry, are we officially saying the power rankings are now a weekly thing?
Well, like, look, we've 2 championship games next week. There's going to be no change to the power rankings. I think it'd be a waste of time. There's 10 the following week. Why not let it sit for a week and then you can come at me with all your gigs and your jobs?
Well, if Monaghan beat Tyrone, they have to leapfrog on.
I'll still talk to you next week.
Let the public decide. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Tommy will be back next week. The power rankings might not be. Wouldn't have been like this under Sheehan.
Obviously, listen to Football Pod the odd time.
And I was looking at the power rankings and I thought that Jesus Owen must still be feeling the effects of these mushrooms.
On tomorrow's show, David Brady, Graham Hunter, Keith Tracy's You Had to Be There, and plenty more besides, including reaction to tonight's Champions League. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night edition available now. Right now is a classic edition of our crappy quiz with the one and only Kenny Cunningham. Have a wonderful Wednesday.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night edition available now.
Chris Waddle.